Chapter 1101. Although Thelon didn't mention anything about Bayou, Qinchuan knew that the Tian people wouldn't let Bayou go so easily. Therefore, before going to the Tian people, he had to entrust Bayou to someone he could trust. Sharmila, can you take Bayou to Area 5 and let her return to the Hope first? Qinchuan looked at Sharmila. She doesn't like her current body. In fact, she's very uncomfortable. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Sharmila agreed almost without hesitation. Okay, no problem. I'll take Bayou to Factory 9 now. Thelon, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but frown slightly when he heard Qinchuan and Sharmila's conversation. He glanced at Qinchuan and then at Sharmila, but in the end, he didn't stop Sharmila from agreeing. After Sharmila left with Bayou, Qinchuan asked Knight Serenity to leave with them. He also warned Knight Serenity not to leave Bayou's side under any circumstances, and not to let any unknown people take the Hope or Bayou away. When she heard Qinchuan's message, Knight Serenity unconsciously glanced at Thelon. She knew that the reason Qinchuan asked her to protect Bayou was to prevent the Tian people from taking Bayou away. However, she didn't think Qinchuan had a way to protect Bayou. Even though Qinchuan had just killed 2 third-level experts from the Void Empire, this wasn't enough to scare the Tian people. However, before the matter was settled, Knight Serenity would seriously obey Qinchuan's order and protect Bayou. After Sharmila left with Bayou and Knight Serenity, only Qinchuan and Thelon were left at the scene. Thelon looked around and said to Qinchuan, "I've investigated you and know a lot about you." Qinchuan slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, "So what do you want to say?" "I'm curious about how you caused the Tao runes of the Eternal Forest and the Volcano Star to lose power. What benefits do you get from doing this?" Thelon looked at Qinchuan with subtle eyes and said, "I couldn't figure it out before, but now I understand. You were able to fight and kill 2 third-level experts from the Void Empire when you were only at the middle stage of the Dongxi realm. You relied on the benefits you got from the Tao runes, right?" Qinchuan wasn't surprised by Thelon's words. When he saw the Tian people coming, he was prepared to expose his identity. Now that Thelon pointed out his reliance, he just smiled and replied, "If you think so, it's not a big problem." Seeing that Qinchuan didn't quibble, Thelon thought highly of Qinchuan and said, "Let's go to the first zone." The first zone was not only the core area of the Tian people, but also the core area of the whole Stanzos. Even the members of the Tian people had to apply for permission to enter the first zone. Only the core members like Thelon and Shamir could enter the first zone freely. Under Thelon's guidance, Qinchuan also enjoyed the treatment that only the core members of the Tian people could enjoy. He entered the first zone almost without any check. Qinchuan originally thought that the first zone would have a large number of magnificent palaces, surrounded by mountains and rivers, which would be magnificent. However, in fact, the environment of the first zone was very primitive, with grasslands and mountains, gurgling streams, singing birds and fragrant flowers. It was beautiful and natural. Qinchuan looked at the scene in front of him with some surprise. He asked Thelon, "Is this your garden or hunting ground?" "No, what you see is the whole picture of the first zone. We Tian people have lived on this land since we were born, and there is no exception even now," Thelon proudly said to Qinchuan. "Although the outside world is prosperous, beautiful, and full of high-tech, in my heart, those things can't even compare to a handful of soil here." Qinchuan laughed and said, "Indeed, a golden nest or a silver nest is not as good as a dog's kennel." Hearing Qinchuan's words, the smile on Thelon's face suddenly froze. He turned to look at Qinchuan and felt that Qinchuan was scolding him, but he didn't have any conclusive evidence. "Let's go. The elders are already waiting for you." Thelon decided not to make trouble for Qinchuan for the time being. He would take Qinchuan to meet the elders first, and then talk about other things after the business was done. When Thelon took Qinchuan to the center of the grassland and saw a group of old men roasting whole lambs around a bonfire, Qinchuan was greatly shocked because the 9 old men present were all overlords in the form synthesis stage. However, judging from their behavior, they were like a group of shepherds, full of smiles and talking loudly. They didn't have the meticulous appearance of the otherworldly experts that he had imagined at all. Are you surprised? Thelon saw the surprised look on Chinchuan's face and said lightly, We Tian people have always pursued nature and freedom. We are never bound by rules and regulations. This is the real Tian people. I'm really surprised. They are completely different from the Tian people in my imagination. Chinchuan subtly glanced at the Celestial Clan elders who were eating mutton and drinking wine. He said to Tai Long, Only extraordinary existences like your Celestial Clan have the qualifications to pursue such a return to nature. Thelon smiled and did not respond to Chinchuan. He took 2 steps forward and said to the 9 elders who were eating meat, Elders, I'm back. I brought Chinchuan with me. Hearing Thelon's words, the 9 elders put down the meat in their hands and looked at Chinchuan, who was standing beside Thelon. Chinchuan saluted the 9 elders in a neither servile nor overbearing manner and said, Greetings, I'm Chinchuan. I'm your junior. Not bad. You are somewhat similar to the young hero in my imagination. The gray-haired 4th elder smiled and seemed to be quite satisfied with Chinchuan. Is it this boy who caused the loss of power of the Taoist symbols in the eternal forest and volcano star? The 3rd elder, who had always been strict, looked deeply at Chinchuan and said indifferently, How dare you stand in front of us after doing such a thing? Hearing the 3rd elder's words, Chinchuan pursed his lips and replied, Senior, this junior has no choice but to do such a thing. I have no intention of becoming enemies with the Tian clan. Ha! If you had killed our Tian people's guards, you wouldn't have the chance to stand in front of us today. The 6th elder laughed and said, Boy, we're very interested in your ability to absorb the power of the Taoist symbols. Can you tell us about it? Chinchuan said frankly, Sorry, it's a secret of mine. I can't tell you. Thelon saw that the topic was getting off topic, so he interrupted, Elders, let's ask Chinchuan about the Void Empire first. We can talk about other topics after we finish our business. Chapter 11:02. At the mention of the Void Empire, the faces of the elders became serious. They would not underestimate their evil enemy, the Void Empire. Chinchuan, tell us the details of your fight with Meng Luo and Meng Zun. The 3rd elder looked at Chinchuan. Don't miss out on any details. If it involves your privacy, you can hide it. Chinchuan nodded and replied, The situation was like this. I disguised myself as a guard of the dream race. And then, Chinchuan was straightforward and tried his best to be fair and objective. There was almost no personal emotion mixed in. Except for the rune sword and the little armor dragon, Chinchuan did not hide anything else. As for the heavenly light and the heavenly sword, Chinchuan said that they were his unique skills. After listening to Chinchuan's story, the 7th elder frowned slightly and asked Chinchuan, Can you show us your Leifa? According to Chinchuan's description, Leifa played a key role in the battle. The 7th elder wanted to see how strong Leifa, who could injure and even kill a level 3 expert of the Void Empire, was. Chinchuan looked at the 7th elder awkwardly and said, Senior, it's not that I don't want to show you, but I just went through a big battle. Now I have less than 10% of my spiritual energy left. It's not enough for me to show you Leifa. I didn't think it through. The 7th elder took out a bottle of milky white medicine and threw it to Chinchuan. He said, This is heavenly goat milk. It can quickly restore your spiritual energy. Drink it. Chinchuan took the heavenly goat milk and drank it without hesitation. Seeing that Chinchuan drank the heavenly goat milk so easily, the 7th elder smiled and asked, Aren't you afraid that I'll poison you? Chinchuan grinned and said, If you want to harm me, you don't have to poison me. Just do it. I don't have the power to resist anyway. After drinking the heavenly goat milk, Chinchuan felt a warm current surging in his dantian. In a few breaths, the spiritual energy in his body was filled. He almost recovered to his peak. This amazing recovery ability surprised Chinchuan. Even 10 spirit culturing pills might not be able to achieve such an effect. Seeing the surprised expression on Chinchuan's face, Thelon explained to Chinchuan, The heavenly goat milk is the secret of the Tian people. It's extremely rare and is only supplied to overlords in the combination stage. Even with my status, I can only get 3 bottles every 10 years. Qin Chuan immediately knew that the heavenly goat milk was an extremely precious treasure. He bowed to the 7th elder and said, "Senior, thank you for your gift. Okay, now you can use your Leifa." The 7th elder smiled and said, "As long as the power of your Leifa can reach a level that I'm satisfied with, I don't mind giving you 2 more bottles of heavenly goat milk." Hearing the 7th elder's words, Qin Chuan's eyes lit up. He let out a low roar, and a ball of lightning condensed in his right palm. Soon, the lightning turned into an azure ball of lightning. It emitted a heart-palpitating fluctuation of power, causing everyone's expression to become serious. Based purely on perception, the power of this Leifa should not be underestimated. The 7th elder narrowed his eyes and said to Qin Chuan, "Attack me." Qin Chuan frowned slightly. After seeing that no one objected, he appeared in front of the 7th elder in a flash. He raised his hand and threw the Leifa at the 7th elder. Buzz! The 7th elder raised his hand and waved his palm. He did not allow the Leifa to approach him. Instead, he was in a deadlock with Qin Chuan. When Leifa showed signs of instability, the 1st elder, who had been silent all this while, suddenly made his move. He raised his hand and a dark hole appeared between Qin Chuan and the 7th elder, sucking Leifa into it. When he saw this scene, Qin Chuan heaved a sigh of relief. If the stalemate continued, the lightning technique would go out of control, and a huge explosion would definitely occur. If that really happened, it would be very awkward. This Leifa's power is indeed extraordinary. The 7th elder looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and said, "If I was not prepared and was attacked by you like Meng Luo and Zun Meng, I might have been seriously injured." Hearing the 7th elder's evaluation of Leifa, everyone looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated expression. Now, they truly believed that Qin Chuan had the ability to kill Meng Luo and Zun Meng. A brat at the middle stage of the insightful emptiness realm has the ability to kill an overlord at the body integration stage. His talent is peerless and rarely seen. The 3rd elder stared deeply at Qin Chuan and asked, "Are you a humanoid?" Qin Chuan nodded and replied, "I am indeed a humanoid. I come from Tron Nebula, same galaxy, Caesar City." Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, the 9th elder nodded and said, "On the way here, we have already investigated your background. You are indeed from the same galaxy in Tron Nebula. When you reached the soul formation stage, you passed the 9 heavenly tribulations and became a 5th-level formation master at the Talisman Formation Master Exchange Conference. You sealed the Insect King by yourself and saved Sane City. After that, you went to Terong City and joined the Tushan clan as a consecrator." Qin Chuan wasn't surprised that the Tian people would investigate his past. If the Tian people didn't investigate anything, he would be surprised. Reality proved that his experience in the same galaxy was very useful. At the very least, it didn't make his experience seem too strange. As for where he was and what he was doing before he came to Caesar City, the Tian people definitely wouldn't be able to find out. However, even if they asked, he wasn't afraid because he had already thought of a countermeasure. We also found out that when you were in Tron Nebula, you had a great battle with a perfect 4th-level warrior from the Void Empire. When you killed him, you fell into a deep sleep. 10 years later, you woke up in the Celestial Cluster. The 9th elder looked at Qin Chuan and said indifferently, "The reason why you came to the Celestial Cluster from Tron Nebula was because of the young master of the Yin clan, Duoluin." Hearing the 9th elder's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but show a touch of excitement on his face. He eagerly asked, "Senior, what happened in the 10 years that I was asleep? I really want to know why Duoluin brought me to the Celestial Cluster. What's his purpose?" Hearing Qin Chuan's question, the 9th elder shook his head and said, "You'll have to ask the Yin clan. We only know that this happened, but we don't know the specific reason. Also, I have something to tell you." Qin Chuan was puzzled and asked, "What is it?" The 9th elder looked at Qin Chuan meaningfully and said, "Tron Nebula was attacked not long ago. Tron Nebula was destroyed. Chapter 1103. When Qin heard that the Ninth Elder had destroyed Tron Capital, he was stunned for a moment. His first reaction was that the Ninth Elder was lying to him, but then he realized that there was no need for the Ninth Elder to lie to him. Moreover, after he woke up, he tried to contact the Tushan family to ask for information, but no one responded to him. So the reason why the Tushan family didn't respond to him was because they had met with an accident. Thinking of this, Qin expression gradually became serious. He asked the Ninth Elder, "Who did it?" "I don't know. We're still investigating." The Ninth Elder looked at Qin, "But we've already found some clues that point to the divine race." Qin frowned, but then he felt relieved. If it was Zerg who destroyed Tron Capital, then it wasn't incomprehensible. Seeing the relieved expression on Qin's face, the Ninth Elder asked curiously, "You don't seem to be surprised that the divine race would do such a thing?" Qin sneered and said, "In your eyes, they're the sacred race, but in my eyes, they will always be the insect race. They can't be seen in public and can only do shady things in the dark corners." Hearing Qin's words, the way everyone looked at Qin changed. They hadn't heard anyone call the divine race Zerg for many years. Today, everyone thought that the divine race had gotten rid of the unpleasant title of Zerg. "I didn't expect you demi-humans to still remember it." The Ninth Elder sighed. When the ancient humans were still around, the divine race was indeed Zerg. Even if they created a treasure like the divine artifact, no one thought that they deserved the title of divine race. After the ancient humans and demi-humans disappeared from the universe, Zerg truly rose and began to walk the universe as the divine race. Over time, people forgot that they were once Zerg. Maybe some people will forget, but I won't. Qin's words were resolute and decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. All the things Zerg had done to the Banished Land, his experiences in the same galaxy, and the alliance between Zerg and the Void Empire made Qin hate Zerg even more. He would never forgive Zerg for what he had done, and he would never live in peace with Zerg. When everyone saw how much Qin hated Zerg, they were somewhat curious as to whether Qin had an unknown past with Zerg. Otherwise, there was no reason for Qin to hate Zerg so much. However, this was Qin's privacy. If Qin did not take the initiative to say it, they would not ask. Haha, although Zerg is wearing the glamorous clothing of the Holy Clan, his actions are still barbaric and cruel. It is more appropriate to call him Zerg. The Ninth Elder sighed and said to Qin, "What happened in Tron Nebula made us very sad. If we can find conclusive evidence to prove that all of this was done by Zerg, we will send someone to demand justice from Zerg." Qin nodded and said to the Ninth Elder, "If you need my help in any way during this process, I will definitely do my best to help." After chatting with Qin about Tron City, the Ninth Elder brought up the matter of the Silver Clan. He said to Qin, 10 years ago, Tron Nebula sent a request for help to the Tian people. They hoped that we could send a universe overlord to Tron Nebula to deal with the remnants of the Void Empire. At that time, the universe overlord who accepted the order was Argentin. When the Ninth Elder mentioned Argentin, Qin's face couldn't help but show a hint of coldness. The Ninth Elder acted as if he didn't see the change in Qin's expression and continued. "When Argentin came back, he brought someone with him. That person was your girlfriend, Luzi." While investigating Qin's past, the Ninth Elder naturally found out about the relationship between Qin and Luzi. From this, they could confirm that the reason Qin targeted Luzi was because of Dream Master. Qin didn't understand and asked, "Elder, if it was Argentin who brought Luzi back, then why did Luzi appear in the Dream Clan and become the Saintess of the Dream Clan? We don't know about this matter at the moment, but previously we sent someone to the Silver Clan to invite Argentin over. Unfortunately, Argentin's whereabouts are unknown," the Ninth Elder said. "We suspect that Argentin, like Dream Master and Meng Luo, was poisoned by the Void Empire. The real Argentin is already dead." When Qin heard this, he frowned slightly and asked, "Then when was she replaced? Before or after Tron Nebula?" "It should be after. the ninth elder said to Qin Chuan. Before that, Argentin's behavior was very normal. Hearing the ninth elder, Qin Chuan still had some doubts, but he didn't show it. As for the matter of capturing Yin Su, he would let the Tian clan worry about it. He only needed to wait until there was a result before asking about it. Qin Chuan, we Tian people will take care of the Void Empire and the Silver Clan. You don't need to worry about it. Now, we should talk about the compensation. The ninth elder looked at Qin Chuan and said, You attacked the Eternal Forest and the Volcanic Star, causing the Tao runes to lose power. Before that, you disguised yourself as Sharmilla's guard and approached the Sky Thunder Taoism. Although the Sky Thunder Taoism hasn't lost power yet, it will definitely happen in the future. Hearing the ninth elder's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but sigh. He knew that there were some things that he couldn't avoid. For the Sky Clan to seriously discuss the matter of compensation and not directly attack him was already giving him enough face. If he couldn't satisfy the Sky Clan in terms of compensation, then he really wouldn't have any face left. Senior, after I defeated the rank 3 Wizard of the Void Empire, Lettuce, I obtained a trophy that can be used to compensate for the loss of the Sky Race. Qin Chuan had already thought of a countermeasure. He would never use a disgusting thing like the Dream Sand. It was the most suitable compensation for the Tian people. However, to Qin Chuan's surprise, the ninth elder wasn't satisfied with this condition. The Dream Sand is a semi-divine tool of the Dream Clan. It was famous in ancient times. Now the wizard Artemisia Lettuce has refined it with the help of the Dream Master. She has killed countless people. Although the Dream Sand is a semi-divine tool, it doesn't conform to the philosophy of the Tian people. Even if you give it to the Tian people for free, we will never use it. Instead, we will seal the Dream Sand forever or even destroy it. Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but become a little ugly when he heard the ninth elder's words. Although he knew that the Tian people wouldn't like the Dream Sand, he didn't expect the ninth elder to be so blunt. There was no room for negotiation. Chapter 1104. After thinking for a while, Qin Chuan asked the ninth elder, What kind of compensation does the ninth elder want from me? Qin Chuan's idea was simple and plain. Since the ninth elder was not satisfied with the compensation he proposed, the ninth elder would have to propose one himself. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the ninth elder pondered for a while, then looked at the others and asked, What do you all think? Hearing the ninth elder's words, the other elders all pondered, thinking about how to reach a compensation that would satisfy both sides. Although Qin Chuan was only at the early Dongshu realm, judging from the actual combat strength he had shown, Qin Chuan was qualified to talk to them on an equal footing. Moreover, Qin Chuan had a powerful assistant, Knight Serenity, by his side. The combined strength of the two was not inferior to the major forces stationed in Stansos. After a moment of communication, the ninth elder looked at Qin Chuan again and asked, Qin Chuan, since your power comes from Daowen, how about you compensate with the power you obtained from Daowen? Qin Chuan frowned slightly and said, Please tell me, Senior. After our discussion, we hope that you can use the wood and fire battle formations that you have mastered, as well as the Leifa that you used before as compensation, the ninth elder said to Qin Chuan. This is a result of our preliminary discussion. What do you think? Qin Chuan couldn't help but fall into silence when he heard the ninth elder's words. The reason he hadn't immediately responded to the ninth elder wasn't because the ninth elder's compensation was excessive, but because the compensation was too simple and too lenient. The only wood battle formation that Qin Chuan mastered was still the World of Wood, while the fire battle formation was the Burning Sky that was fed back to him by the Rune Sword, and the level 5 battle formation, Purgatory Fire, that he obtained from the Tushan clan. As for Leifa Qianjun, it was also fed back to him by the Rune Sword. However, Leifa Qianjun was not a battle formation, but a unique skill that was tailor-made for Qin Chuan by the Rune Sword. It was definitely not easy for others to learn Leifa Qianjun, at least for those who did not have Thunder attribute talent runes. Moreover, the world of Wood and Burning Sky could grow in Qin Chuan's hands, but in the hands of others, they were just ordinary level 5 battle formations. using a few level 5 battle formations and Leifa Qinjuan's learning conditions to compensate the Tian people. Qin Chuan felt that he had made a profit. However, even if he had made a profit, Qin Chuan could not readily agree to the Tian people's demands. He had to pretend to be very embarrassed. After all, the Tian people had already seen the power of Leifa Qinjun. If he readily handed over such a powerful, unique skill, it would make the Tian people suspicious. Senior, using this condition as compensation is really a bit harsh. Qin Chuan looked at the ninth elder with some embarrassment and said, I have a proposal, but I don't know if I should say it. Hearing this, the ninth elder smiled and said to Qin Chuan, say it. In the ninth elder's opinion, other conditions could be negotiated, but he had to obtain such a powerful Leifa battle formation. As far as I know, there are many Dao runes in the celestial cluster. Moreover, they are Dao runes with repetitive attributes. I want to absorb the power of these Dao runes with repetitive attributes. For this, I am willing to pay a battle formation of the same attribute as the price. Qin Chuan said to the ninth elder very seriously, actually, one Dao rune of each attribute is enough. The others are superfluous, right? Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the crowd couldn't help but fall silent. Everyone's gaze towards Qin Chuan was exceptionally strange. Facing the gazes of the crowd, Qin Chuan felt a great pressure in his heart. He also felt extremely embarrassed. He knew that his previous suggestion was a little too much. Qin Chuan, do you think we will pay the price of dozens of Dao runes for a mere level 5 battle formation? The ninth elder took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said, don't mention this again in the future. Qin Chuan wanted to drop the matter, but at this moment, the runic sword reminded Qin Chuan that he could use level 6 battle formations for the transaction. After receiving the runic sword suggestion, Qin Chuan tried asking, what if I'm willing to use level 6 battle formations of various attributes? Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone fell silent once more. After a while, the ninth elder took a deep breath and asked Qin Chuan, you have level 6 battle formations? Level 6 battle formations of various attributes? Qin Chuan nodded and said to the ninth elder, I have extraordinary talent in the Dao of talismans. I can comprehend Dao runes in a short period of time and comprehend battle formations of compatible attributes. However, the price is that the Dao runes will lose power because of this. It is irreversible. This was the excuse that Qin Chuan had thought of long ago. After all, it was no longer a secret that he could absorb the power of Dao runes. There was no point in continuing to hide it. Hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, the ninth elder couldn't help but be moved. He said, is there really such a special ability in this world? Not only did the ninth elder find it hard to believe, but the others also felt that Qin Chuan's words were a bit exaggerated. However, when they thought of the Dao runes that were losing power, they couldn't refute Qin Chuan. Actually, my mental strength has been abnormally strong since I was young. The mental strength of an ordinary talisman array master is already the limit at the peak of the liquid level. It is very difficult for them to advance to the core formation stage. However, my mental strength has already advanced to the core formation stage when I was in the spirit severing stage. In order to make his words more convincing, Qin Chuan immediately demonstrated the strength of his mental strength to everyone. After everyone came in contact with Qin Chuan's mental strength, their expressions became even more complicated. The strength of Qin Chuan's mental strength was considered to be at the peak even among the overlords of the unification stage. It was comparable to a level 7 talisman array master. You are really a genius. The ninth elder looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, we can agree to your conditions, but we have another request. Qin Chuan immediately said excitedly, please say it. As long as it could help the rune sword absorb more power from the Dao runes, he would agree to any request made by the Tian people as long as it wasn't too excessive. Before I make this request, I want to ask you something. After you become stronger, can you comprehend a higher level battle formation from the Dao runes that are compatible with the attributes? The ninth elder looked at Qin Chuan with a burning gaze. It seemed that this matter was very important. Hearing the ninth elder's words, Chuan thought for a moment and asked, "Does the ninth elder want to get a level 7 space attribute battle array from me?" The ninth elder wasn't surprised that Chuan could guess this point. He nodded frankly and said to Chuan, "Although the space attribute Dao runes are extremely rare and precious, if it can't provide us with any practical benefits, then we don't need it. As long as you can do this, then you can also comprehend the space attribute Dao runes. However, you need to provide us with a level 7 space attribute battle array after this as a reward." Chapter 1105. Although Chuan had already guessed that the ninth elder would propose a Dao rune of the space attribute in exchange for a stronger battle array, he was still so excited that he almost jumped up when he heard the ninth elder's words. Previously, when he made the suggestion, Chuan didn't have any extravagant hopes that the celestial race would allow him to comprehend the space attribute Dao runes. He originally thought that he would miss the opportunity to comprehend the space attribute Dao runes. But who would have thought that the celestial race would take the initiative to mention this point? Chuan naturally wouldn't let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to enhance his strength. He said to the ninth elder with great sincerity, "Okay, as long as I advance to the form synthesis stage, I will definitely be able to comprehend a level 7 space attribute battle array. But before that, I can also comprehend a level 7 space attribute battle array. However, I can only comprehend a level 7 space attribute battle array after I advance to the form synthesis stage." Hearing Chuan's words, the ninth elder couldn't help but frown slightly. According to Chuan's words, Chuan wanted to comprehend the Dao rune of the space attribute in advance. However, if he wanted to comprehend a level 7 space attribute battle array, he would have to wait until he advanced to the form synthesis stage. Although Chuan was very talented, it would take at least 100 years for him to advance to the form synthesis stage. During this time, anything could happen. There were too many uncertainties. The ninth elder couldn't help but look at the great elder, hoping that the great elder could give him a clear indication. Facing the ninth elder's gaze, the great elder said faintly, "If you want to have a great harvest, you must pay a great price. Talisman arrays of the space attribute are rare, and battle arrays of the space attribute are even rarer. A level 7 space attribute battle array is even rarer." Hearing the great elder's words, the ninth elder understood that this deal could continue. Although there would be a certain risk, it was all worth it for the great rewards. "Chuan, we agree to your conditions." Ninth elder turned back to look at Chuan and said, "You have to provide us with metal, wood, water, fire, earth, light, wind, and space elemental grade 6 battle arrays, the Leifa that you used earlier, and the grade 7 space elemental grade 7 battle array in the future. As a condition of the deal, you can absorb Dao runes with the same elemental attributes as well as space elemental Dao runes. If you don't have any other opinions, we could take the oath now." Although the ninth elder believed that Chuan wouldn't dare to cheat them on this kind of thing, it was good for both of them to make an oath. Hearing this, Chuan said almost without hesitation, "I hereby swear that after absorbing the Tian people's Dao runes with the same elemental attributes, I am willing to provide the Tian people with a level 6 battle array and a Leifa with the same elemental attributes. After absorbing the Dao runes of the space attribute, I am willing to provide the Tian people with a level 6 space attribute battle array and a level 7 space attribute battle array when I reach the combination stage. If the Tian people don't harm me, I will be punished by heaven if I break this oath." An oath couldn't be made lightly. Since it was made, it must be kept. Otherwise, Chuan would be punished by heaven. Moreover, Chuan added a condition that the Tian people couldn't harm him in the oath. If the Tian people had any evil intentions towards him, then he could break the oath without any scruples. The ninth elder naturally saw through Chuan's thoughts, but he didn't care about these trivial things. If they really had evil intentions towards Chuan, then they wouldn't have talked to Chuan so calmly. However, the ninth elder didn't represent the Tian people to make an oath to Chuan, because it wasn't necessary. When the ninth elder saw that Qin Chuan had made the oath, he said to Qin Chuan, "Later, I will arrange for Sharmila to take you to comprehend the various Tao runes. As for the battle formation, after you comprehend it, you can give it to Sharmila. But I need you to give me Leifa now. That's not a problem, but I need you to provide me with a carrier that can bear the power of thunder." Since Qin Chuan had agreed to this condition, he would never go back on his word. He would give Leifa to the Tian people without any reservation. As for what the Tian people could learn from it, it would depend on their own abilities. When the ninth elder heard Qin Chuan's words, he raised his hand and waved it. A heavy stone slab appeared in front of Qin Chuan. This was a unique stone that the Tian people had. It could bear any kind of power and would last for a long time. Seeing this, Qin Chuan didn't hesitate. He immediately used Leifa and branded it on the stone slab. The ninth elder looked at the Leifa on the stone slab and confirmed that it was no different from the Leifa that Qin Chuan had used before. He nodded and asked, "What's the name of this Leifa?" Qin Chuan replied, "Qianjun." "Good name." The ninth elder put away the stone slab with satisfaction and said to Qin Chuan, "The deal is done. You are now a friend of the Tian people. In the future, you can communicate with Thelon and Sharmila more often." When Qin Chuan heard this, he said to the ninth elder, "Senior, I have a presumptuous request. I would like to ask Senior to help me find the best doctor to treat a friend of mine." The ninth elder laughed and said to Qin Chuan, "The friend you're talking about is your girlfriend Luzi. Since she was previously controlled by a level 3 wizard of the Void Empire, she must have been affected by the wizard's obscurantism. Now that the wizard is dead, the obscurantism will disappear in 3 days." Hearing the ninth elder's words, Qin Chuan was overjoyed and quickly said, "Senior, thank you for your help. Well, we old guys need to have a good rest. You should leave." The ninth elder ordered them to leave. Qin Chuan didn't stay and left with Thelon. After Qin Chuan and Tian Long left, the ninth elder turned to look at the people around him and asked, "What do you think of this boy?" The second elder, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said in a deep voice, "He is lying." Hearing the second elder's words, everyone showed a subtle look on their faces and asked, "How is he lying?" The second elder looked up at the first elder. After seeing no reaction from the first elder, the second elder continued, "He is not a humanoid, but a human." Hearing the second elder's words, everyone's expressions became very interesting. Qin Chuan was a human, the human race that had disappeared since ancient times. The second elder was the only Tian people who had mastered the heavenly heart connection. Since he was so sure that Qin Chuan was a human, it couldn't be wrong. No wonder he has the ability to comprehend Tao runes in such a short period of time. If he's a human, then everything makes sense. Only a human who once possessed a runic land can have such a powerful ability. The third elder murmured in a low voice, "Now that people from the Void Empire have appeared frequently and are up to no good, and the ancient humans have reappeared in the universe, it seems that the future won't be peaceful. Since Qin Chuan is a member of the ancient humans, there must be more ancient humans behind him." The fourth elder looked at the first elder and asked, "Big brother, what do you think of this?" The first elder said indifferently, "Don't be an enemy, don't be a friend. Just watch silently." Chapter 1106. Thelon escorted Qin Chuan to the port of Area 1, where Sharmila's princess was waiting for Qin Chuan. Thelon stopped and looked at Qin Chuan, asking, "Are you really willing to hand over Leifa? Don't you have any resentment?" If it were Thelon who had mastered Leifa, which could make a cultivator at the Dongshu stage threaten a cultivator at the combination stage, he would never hand it over so easily. The fewer people who knew about one's trump card, the better. Hearing Thelon's words, Qin Chuan smiled and asked, "Tell me, if I don't want to hand over Leifa, what should I do to satisfy the elders today?" Tai Long couldn't help but fall silent when he heard this. He didn't know how to answer Qin Chuan's question because he knew very well that the Elders Institute was determined to obtain the lightning technique. Not only did the Elders Institute want to add an ultimate skill to the celestial race, but more importantly, the Elders Institute wanted to study the lightning technique and then break it. If there was a conflict between Qin Chuan and the Tian people and a fight broke out, Qin Chuan's Leifa would be a great threat, but Leifa's deciphered Leifa would no longer be a threat. Thelon believed that if he could think of this, Qin Chuan, as a smart person, could also think of it. In his opinion, the reason why Qin Chuan was willing to hand over Leifa was that he didn't want to offend the Tian people and become enemies with the Tian people. Seeing Thelon's silence, Qin Chuan smiled and said to Thelon, "First of all, I was wrong. I broke into the eternal forest and the volcanic star and tricked Sharmila into taking me to comprehend the heavenly thunder way, which caused the Tian people to lose 13 Taoist glyphs. You asked me for compensation instead of asking me to pay with my life, which is already very kind of you. Secondly, I really want to make friends with the Tian people." Thelon sighed and said to Qin Chuan, "Anyway, your performance won my respect and my friendship." Hearing Thelon's words, Qin Chuan grinned and said, "That's enough." Perhaps from Thelon's point of view, Qin Chuan had made a loss in this deal, but from Qin Chuan's point of view, he had made a big profit. So what if the Tian people cracked Leifa? The cracked version of Leifa was only the elementary version. As his realm increased, so would Leifa. Therefore, he didn't need to worry about these problems at all. Of course, Qin Chuan couldn't tell Thelon about these things. After bidding farewell to Qin Chuan boarded the princess and went to the hall to see Sharmila under the lead of Qin Chuan. "Qin Chuan, you've gone too far." Sharmila glared at Qin Chuan. "You actually used me to absorb the power of the heavenly thunder Tao." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Chuan said helplessly, "I had no choice. After all, you only gave me half a year. If I didn't find a way to improve my strength, I wouldn't be a match for Meng Luo and Meng Zun. Oh, I should call them Louis Rue and AI Dan. You're quibbling." Sharmila was angry. "You have to compensate me." Qin Chuan smiled bitterly and said, "I've already discussed the compensation with your elders. I've already compensated you with my strongest Leifa. Don't ask me for any compensation." Everything was settled so quickly? Sharmila was a little surprised. "Did your conversation go well?" Qin Chuan thought for a while and said with a smile, "Yes, it went well. Tao inscriptions were treasures in the eyes of many forces in low-level galaxies or nebulas. However, in the eyes of Tian people, Tao inscriptions were dispensable. First of all, if an ordinary talisman formation master wanted to comprehend Tao runes, it would take at least a dozen years, and at most a few dozen years or even a few hundred years. After paying such a huge price to comprehend Tao runes, they would only have the possibility of becoming a 5th-rank battle formation master. If they wanted to truly become a 5th-rank battle formation master, they would have to find a battle formation that was compatible with their attributes. However, a level 5 battle formation master's combat strength was only equivalent to that of a divine transformation realm expert. In a celestial cluster, they were definitely weak. To spend so much time and energy just to obtain a combat strength comparable to that of a divine transformation realm expert was an extremely low-cost performance ratio. If one wanted to become a level 6 talisman formation master, not only was the requirement of mental strength higher, but battle formations were also rarer. To comprehend a level 6 battle formation master, one would need a very long time to study it. If one spent all this time on cultivation, one might have already reached the Dongshu stage. It was also because of this that, apart from some people who had a special fondness for the Tao of talisman formations, or people who were very talented in the Tao of talisman formations, very few people would wholeheartedly study the Tao of talisman formations, and very few people would be willing to spend a large amount of time to comprehend Tao glyphs. It was also because of this that Tao glyphs had become an extremely useless existence. Even Qin Chuan, who was extraordinarily talented, probably wouldn't have spent too much energy on talisman formation Tao if it weren't for the help of the rune sword. If it weren't for this, the Tian people wouldn't have taken out Tao inscriptions with duplicated attributes to make a deal with Qin Chuan so readily. Using something that was basically useless in exchange for something that was quite useful was a profit no matter how you looked at it. Since you've already compensated the Elder Council, then I'll forget about it. Sharmila looked at Qin Chuan and said, I've already sent by you to factory number 9. She has returned to the Hope, and now the Hope is slowly recovering. Your subordinate is also in factory number 9. Do you want to go take a look? Qin Chuan shook his head and said to Sharmila, I want to go see Xiao Zi more. After that, we'll depart to absorb the power of Tao inscriptions. Even though AI Dan and AI Rue were dead, Qin Chuan felt that things weren't that simple. To better protect himself and the people around him, Qin Chuan felt that he had to absorb the power of other Tao inscriptions as soon as possible to strengthen the rune sword. Hearing Qin Chuan mention Lu Zi, Sharmila smiled and said to Qin Chuan, I'm sure Lu Zi would like to meet you as well. When Qin Chuan followed Sharmila to Sector 2 and met Sharmila at Lu Zi's cultivation palace, Qin Chuan didn't have any intention of approaching. He looked at Lu Zi's back from afar, and a trace of gentleness flashed in his eyes. He said to Sharmila, Thank you for taking care of Xiao Zi during this period. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Sharmila was confused and asked, Don't you want to talk to her face to face? Qin Chuan shook his head and replied, She's still under the wizard's spell of obscurity. Even if I meet her face to face, I won't be able to communicate normally. So as long as she's fine, I'm relieved. I can go absorb the power of Tao inscriptions first. That way, I'll be able to protect her better in the future. Chapter 11:07. In the current Heaven Star Cluster, there were a total of 5 Water Attribute Tao runes, 4 Metal Attribute Tao runes, 2 Earth Attribute Tao runes, 2 Wind Attribute Tao runes, and 2 Light Attribute Tao runes. Under the condition that he could keep 1 Tao rune of each attribute, plus the special Space Attribute Tao rune, Qin Chuan could absorb a total of 12 Tao runes and recover 12% of the damage to the rune sword. Last time, in order to ensure that he could kill Lettuce in one strike, the runic sword used 10% of its power. With the remaining 3% and the 11% this time, the runic sword could repair 15% of the damage. Next time, if there was a need to fight, he could erupt with 15% of his peak power, which was comparable to the late combination stage. But it was a pity that the rune sword could only last for about 3 minutes if it were to go all out. In order to absorb the power of these Tao runes, Qin Chuan, accompanied by Sharmila, spent nearly 2 months running around. After Qin Chuan absorbed the power of the space-breaking Tao, the princess finally set off and prepared to return to Stansos. In the past 2 months, Qin Chuan had talked to Lu Zi several times. They hadn't really contacted each other for 10 years and seemed to have endless things to talk about. If it wasn't for the fact that he still needed to absorb the power of the Tao runes, he would have already flown back to reunite with Lu Zi. However, this time, Qin Chuan didn't immediately go to see Lu Zi when he returned to Stansos. This was because he still had something to deal with as soon as possible. When the princess arrived at Area 5, Qin Chuan immediately went to Factory Number 9 alone and met Knight Serenity in Factory Number 9. Seeing Qin Chuan return, Knight Serenity respectfully said to Qin Chuan, Master, in the past 2 months, I have been guarding by you. I didn't leave her side at all, and nothing else happened. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly and asked Knight Serenity, You call me Master? Except for the first time when you met me, this seems to be the first time you call me Master. Knight Serenity pursed her lips and said in a low voice, The previous you didn't deserve my true loyalty. Knight Serenity had been thinking about this problem ever since she learned that Qin Chuan had killed 2 level 3 experts of the Void Empire by himself. Now, Qin Chuan had shown such amazing talent and strength in less than a year after she signed a contract with him. Qin Chuan would definitely become stronger and stronger as long as he didn't fall. And Qin Chuan would definitely become stronger in the future. It wasn't shameful to pledge allegiance to such a powerhouse. Are you saying that the current me is worthy of your true loyalty? Qin Chuan said to Knight, Master Knight, Master. Knight Serenity said, Serenity, Master, Serenity's comma Knight. Knight Serenity, comma. Knight Serenity looked at Qin Chuan with a slightly complicated gaze and said, I understand. All right, that's the end of the chat. Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity with a slightly dignified gaze and asked, Are you sure that the person who has been loitering nearby is Argentin? Knight Serenity nodded and replied, I have observed her in secret. I can basically confirm that she is Argentin. Hearing Knight Serenity's confirmation, Qinchuan's expression suddenly became somewhat gloomy. He really didn't expect that Argentin would take the initiative to find trouble with Argentin before he went to find trouble with Argentin. The reason why he didn't immediately meet Lu Zi when he returned to Stansos was to deal with Argentin's matter first. If he couldn't get rid of the potential threat Argentin, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to live a good life. I hate the feeling of being targeted by an overlord at the form synthesis stage. Qinchuan frowned and said to Knight Serenity, Take me to her. We'll get rid of her. No need. I'm already here. Before Qinchuan's voice died away, a silver-white figure appeared behind her. It was Argentin. Hearing Argentin's words, Qinchuan slowly turned to look at Argentin and said in a deep voice, You're quite self-aware. Qinchuan, I'm not here to fight with you today, nor to harm anyone around you. Just like you, I'm also a victim in this matter. Argentin looked at Qinchuan and sighed. I'm not in cahoots with Dream Supremacy and the others. Qinchuan sneered and said, Why should I believe you? Seeing that Qinchuan was ready to fight, Argentin felt helpless and said to Qinchuan, This is a wound left on my body by the people of the Void Empire. Even now, there's no way to heal it. As she spoke, Argentin unbuttoned her shirt and showed her chest to Qinchuan. Seeing the huge corroded wound on Argentin's chest, Qinchuan frowned slightly and said, Is this a trick of yours? I have a suggestion. At this moment, Knight Serenity suddenly said to Argentin, If you're willing to sign a master-servant contract with Qinchuan, then we can trust you. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Argentin rejected almost without thinking. That's impossible. As the Argentin king, the ruler of the Argentin race, Argentin absolutely could not and would not be willing to be the servant of others. As the overlord of the universe, her dignity must not be trampled on. I think that's a good suggestion. Qinchuan smiled, but I won't enslave you for a lifetime. 10 years. We'll only sign a 10-year contract. After 10 years, you'll regain your freedom. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Argentin couldn't help but show a hint of hesitation. She really needed Qinchuan's help now, and if it was only 10 years, it wasn't completely unacceptable. Knight Serenity couldn't help but smile after seeing Argentin's hesitation. She was originally persuaded by Qinchuan with 10 years, and now it seemed that Argentin was going to be persuaded too. Is it really only 10 years? Argentin looked at Qinchuan. After 10 years, give me back my freedom. Qinchuan didn't answer. Instead, he condensed a contract with his power of the will and sent it to Argentin, allowing Argentin to read the contents of the contract as she wished. After checking the contents of the contract, Argentin finally believed Qinchuan's words. For the survival of the Argentin race in the Celestial Cluster, and for the sake of saving herself, she chose to sign the contract. The moment the contract took effect, Qinchuan looked at Argentin and said, This 10-year contract is your compensation for what you've done in the past. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Argentin looked at Qinchuan with a complicated expression. 10 years ago, if it wasn't for me protecting your last shred of life, you would have died long ago. Qinchuan looked deeply at Argentin and asked, What happened in the past 10 years? And what's your relationship with the powerful beings of the Void Empire? Argentin smiled bitterly and said to Qinchuan, I was deceived by Dream Venerable, completely deceived. Chapter 1108. Deception? Hearing Argentin's words, Qinchuan frowned and asked, What is going on? Argentin sighed and told Qinchuan, This story started when I first arrived in Tron Nebula. At the time, I was ordered to go to Tron Nebula to eliminate the remnants of the Void Empire. After I arrived, I headed for the Cosmic Whirlpool. On the way, I was stopped by a mysterious man in a gray robe. The man in the gray robe relied on his profound mastery of the law of space to fight with me. Later, Lu Zi rode on the Hope and passed by the battlefield. The Hope had the ability to evade the attacks of the man in the gray robe, so I used the hope to escape from the battle and followed her to the cosmic whirlpool. At the time, you were already fighting with the remnants of the Void Empire. Even though you had killed Samson, you were exhausted and had entered a state of hibernation. When Lu Zi and I found you, you were in a very bad condition. I saved your life. Since your body couldn't withstand ultra-long distance teleportation, we left you in Tron Nebula. Lu Zi wanted to accompany you for a year, so Lu Zi and I stayed in Tron Nebula for a year. During this year, I discovered that Lu Zi was a very talented young person in the field of illusion. Therefore, I had the thought of recommending her to the Dream Supremacy as his disciple. Actually, I had my own reasons for doing so. I wanted to ally with the Dream Tribe and raise the Een clan status in the Celestial Cluster by another level. After a year, Lu Zi and I returned to the Celestial Cluster and came to Stansos. I brought Lu Zi to meet the Dream Supremacy. After meeting Lu Zi, the Dream Supremacy recognized that Lu Zi was a very talented young person. He was willing to accept Lu Zi as his disciple and make Lu Zi the Dream Tribe Sanus. At the time, Lu Zi and I were very happy. 1. I could use this opportunity to form an alliance between the Een clan and the Dream Tribe. 2. With the help of the Dream Supremacy, Lu Zi would be able to find a way to save you and wake you up from your hibernation. It was the best of both worlds. After that, Lu Zi stayed in the Dream Tribe. I didn't see Lu Zi for a very long time. When I saw Lu Zi again, she didn't recognize me and became very cold. She rarely spoke. I was very surprised by the change in Lu Zi and wanted to ask about it. However, the Dream Supremacy told me that it was because Lu Zi had cultivated the Dream Tribe's secret technique. She would recover after cultivating it. At the time, I had some doubts, but the Dream Supremacy wanted to appease me. He specially proposed to let Lu Zi marry Dwalluan. He wanted to use the marriage to strengthen our alliance. At the time, I was very surprised because Lu Zi had said that no matter how long it took, she would never forget you. I didn't think that Lu Zi would change her mind in just a few years. When I wanted to ask Lu Zi for her opinion, the Dream Supremacy stopped me. Moreover, at that time, the Een clan's position in the Celestial Cluster was very important. I didn't want to offend the Dream Supremacy, so I dropped the matter. I wanted to wait for an opportunity to ask Lu Zi for her opinion. At that time, the Dream Supremacy took a detour and contacted Dwalluan privately. He also told Dwalluan about your existence. Dwalluan had met Lu Zi a few times and couldn't help but be infatuated with Lu Zi. He thought that your existence was completely unnecessary and that you were an obstacle between him and Lu Zi. Therefore, he used Lu Zi's name to hire a mercenary group to go to Tron Nebula to bring you back to the Celestial Cluster. You know what happened after that? Qin Chuan listened quietly to Argentin's words. His expression gradually became gloomy because he had signed a master-servant contract with Argentin. Therefore, it was impossible for Argentin to lie to him. Everything Argentin said now was the truth. From this point of view, Argentin's original intention was indeed good. Unfortunately, the Dream Supremacy was already dead and the person Argentin met was Lettuce. Lu Zi must have inadvertently let Lettuce know about Baiyu and Lin's existence when she was in the Dream Realm. Therefore, all these things happened afterwards. Seeing Qin Chuan's expression become extremely ugly, Argentin sighed and said, "When I sent Lu Zi to the Dream Realm, I was indeed selfish. However, the Dream Realm was indeed the most suitable place for Lu Zi. I didn't know that the Dream Supremacy was a wizard from the Void Empire." Qin Chuan frowned and said, "Now that you know the truth, why did you run away?" Argentin pointed to the wound on his chest and said to Qin Chuan, "At first, I didn't know that the Dream Supremacy and Meng Luo were powerful wizards from the Void Empire. On the night you fought with them, I was attacked. In desperation, I used the power of the Een clan's treasure to escape death. During this period of time, I have been recuperating. When my injury stopped worsening, I showed up and wanted to find the Tian people. However, I found that the Tian people were looking for me everywhere. Therefore, I didn't dare to show up in front of the Tian people. Therefore, I wanted to pass on the truth to the Tian people through you. If you tell these words to the Tian people should believe you. Qin Chuan looked at Argentin. You don't have to pass on the message to the Tian people through me. Argentin smiled bitterly and asked, if we didn't sign a contract, would you believe me? Hearing Argentin's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but be stunned. If they didn't sign a master-servant contract, he might not even give Argentin a chance to speak. When he thought of this, Qin Chuan's gaze towards Yin Su couldn't help but become slightly pitiful. The dignified patriarch of the Yin clan, the renowned king of silver, had fallen to such a state just because she trusted the wrong person. It was truly too tragic. Facing Qin Chuan's pity, Argentin couldn't help but sigh again. She said to Qin Chuan, in the eyes of ordinary people, the universe overlords should be superior. But in the eyes of the Tian people, universe overlords are just stronger ants. If they're serious, they can easily crush such ants. If it weren't for the fear that the Tian people would kill her directly, or even destroy the Yin clan, Argentin would certainly prefer to have a face-to-face talk with the leaders of the Tian people. At this point, what was done couldn't be undone. She only hoped that Qin Chuan's words could work in front of the Tian people and save the Yin clan. I'll explain this to the Tian people. But who was the one who attacked you? Judging from your injuries, is he also from the Void Empire? Qin Chuan was very curious about the person who attacked Argentin. Argentin shook her head and replied, I don't know who he is, but I'm sure that he is from the Void Empire. My injuries were eroded by the power of the Void, so I haven't been able to recover. Chapter 1109. You don't know the identity of the other party? Qin Chuan frowned slightly and asked, did you feel a sense of familiarity during the battle? Argentin shook his head and replied, the battle happened very suddenly and ended very quickly. I was attacked and immediately escaped with the help of a treasure when I was in mortal danger. I didn't give the other party a chance to attack again, so I don't know the identity of the other party. Hearing Argentin's answer, Qin Chuan asked again, how did he get close to you? He pretended to be a guard of the Dream Lord and met me through the mouth of the Dream Lord. I wasn't prepared, so I was attacked. Argentin's face was full of hatred. If I find out who he is, I will kill him with my own hands. Qin Chuan glanced at the wound on Argentin's chest and said to Argentin, I have a way to help you erase the force of the void. Hearing Qin Chuan say that there was a way to erase the force of the void, Argentin immediately said, please help me. Qin Chuan raised his hand and shot a thunderbolt at the wound on Argentin's chest. The force of the void, which exuded an evil aura, only resisted for a moment under the attack of the thunderbolt. Argentin's injury worsened, but it was easier for him to recover. Thank you. Argentin was very grateful to Qin Chuan, but it was really difficult for him to call him master. Qin Chuan saw Argentin's dilemma and smiled faintly. You don't have to worry about whether you should call me master or not. I signed a master-servant contract with you just to guard against you. I don't really want to treat you as a servant. You can just call me by my name, Qin Chuan. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Argentin couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and said to Qin Chuan, thank you. You can rest in factory number 9 and recover. As for other things, I will communicate with the Tian people. Qin Chuan said to Argentin, but you have to be mentally prepared. My words may not be very useful. Argentin nodded and said to Qin Chuan, just do your best. Qin Chuan left factory number 9 and returned to the princess. Sharmila looked at Qin Chuan, who had left and returned, and asked, you've got Argentin in hands again? Qin Chuan wasn't surprised. After all, they were in factory number 9, which was Sharmila's territory. Yes, I've already talked to Argentin. Argentin was deceived by lettuce. Qin Chuan said to Sharmila, and the Void Empire has spies in Stansos. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Sharmila's expression suddenly became very serious. She said in a disgusted tone, I hate the Void Empire. Qin Chuan nodded and agreed. I also hate the Void Empire. If the Void Empire and Zerg didn't exist in this world, it would be very beautiful. Well, you should save these words for the elders. I have to go back first. Sharmila looked at Qin Chuan and asked, are you sure you don't want to come with me to Area 2 to see Luzi? She must miss you very much. Well, Qingchuan's face showed a gentle smile. He said to Sharmila, I want to be by her side after these things are resolved. I don't want to be separated after a short reunion. After 2 months, Qingchuan once again came to Area 1, but this time he didn't see the 9 elders. He only saw the 9th elder. When the 9th elder saw Qingchuan, he said to Qingchuan, What do you want to say? When Qingchuan saw this, he told the 9th elder what he heard from Argentin. After hearing Qingchuan's narration, the 9th elder pondered for a moment and asked, Has Argentin become one of your people? Qingchuan was slightly surprised when he heard this. He didn't understand why the 9th elder was most concerned about this matter and not about the Void Empire. After thinking for a moment, he replied, Yes, I have signed a 10-year contract with Argentin. After 10 years, I will return her freedom. You're quite interesting, kid. The 9th elder laughed and said to Qingchuan, Go back and tell Argentin that since the matter has been explained clearly, we will naturally revoke the arrest warrant for her. However, this time, her actions have affected the stability of the celestial cluster to a certain extent. Therefore, the Yin clan shouldn't think about being promoted to a first-class race for the next 100 years. Qingchuan knew a thing or two about the promotion of a race. In the celestial cluster, the Tian people were a superior race. They were the rulers of the celestial cluster and enjoyed the worship of all the lower races. Every 100 years, a first-class race would have to offer 10% of their profits to the Tian people. A second-class race would have to offer 20% of their profits to the Tian people. A third-class race would have to offer 30% of their profits to the Tian people, and so on. The lowest-class race was a fifth-class race. The Yin clan was a second-class race. If Argentin couldn't reach the mid-body integration stage, or if the Yin clan couldn't produce another overlord at the body integration stage, then it would be very difficult for the Yin clan to become a first-class race. This was also why Argentin wanted to use the power of the dream race to take a shortcut. Now, it seemed that the shortcut she took had harmed the Yin clan. The law of the jungle had always been the law of the universe. Qingchuan didn't have any objections to the Tian people's treatment of the Yin clan. After all, Argentin's request was to protect the Yin clan. The other benefits could be sacrificed. Senior, what do you think of this Void Empire expert hiding in Stansos? Qingchuan looked at the 9th elder and asked, Is there any way to capture him? During this period of time, Stansos has been under martial law. We've sent out a large number of people to investigate, but Stansos is too big. There are thousands of races living here, and the population is in the trillions. It's very difficult to find the Void Empire's spy among so many people. There are too many places he can hide, and there are too many loopholes he can exploit. The 9th elder said to Qingchuan, Unless this person gives himself away, it'll be very difficult for us to catch him. Qingchuan heard this and said to the 9th elder, Argentin mentioned that she was attacked by a mysterious gray-robed man in Tron Nebula. When I was fighting against the remnants of the Void Empire, I was also attacked by a mysterious black-robed man. I suspect that the black-robed man and the gray-robed man are in cahoots. They might be the Void Empire's allies in our universe. Qingchuan couldn't directly mention Zerg's name, so he chose to remind the 9th elder in a subtle way. He hoped that the 9th elder would take this matter seriously and investigate it seriously. The 9th elder looked at Qingchuan meaningfully and said, I understand what you mean. This matter isn't as simple as you think. Chapter 11:10. Qingchuan left Area 1 with a heart full of doubts. On his way to Area 2, he kept thinking about the last sentence the 9th elder said to him. This matter is not as simple as I thought. Could it be that the Tian people know that the Void Empire's ally is Zerg? Qingchuan was extremely suspicious and said in a low voice, If the Tian clan knows about this, doesn't that mean that this is already something that is out in the open, but no one has deliberately exposed it? Why would they condone Zerg's collusion with the Void Empire? Qingchuan had too many questions that he wanted to ask, but unfortunately, the 9th elder did not intend to solve them for him. Obviously, with his current situation, he could not touch on such a deeper matter. Perhaps he could really come into contact with the truth of these things after he advanced to the combination stage. Since he could not figure it out, Qin Chuan temporarily put these things to the back of his mind. He was about to meet Lu Zi, and he could not help but feel excited. When Qin Chuan arrived at Sharmilla's cultivation palace and saw Lu Zi standing in the garden, the two of them could not help but burst into tears. They quickly ran to each other, hugged each other tightly, and even kissed each other sweetly without any scruples. Sharmilla stood aside and watched Qin Chuan and Lu Zi interact intimately, as if there was no one else around. She could not help but sigh. This is true love. After the 5-minute affectionate kiss, Qin Chuan held Lu Zi's cheeks with both hands and said to Lu Zi, "I missed you very much." Lu Zi nodded. Tears fell down her cheeks. She choked and said, "I missed you too. Sharmilla told me a lot about you. It's really been hard on you. In order to protect you, to protect our friends, this little bit of hard work is nothing." Qin Chuan grinned. He could not help but peck Lu Zi's rosy lips twice. He said to Lu Zi, "It's really been hard on you. In order to save me, you came all the way to the celestial cluster. You fought here alone, and you were schemed against by bad people. You went through so many hardships. It's really not easy. Well, you two have a good chat. I will leave this place to you. I won't come here for the time being, and no one will disturb you." Sharmilla tactfully chose to leave. She also created an absolutely quiet environment for Qin Chuan and Lu Zi to get along. It could be said that she had done her best. After Sharmilla left, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi walked hand in hand in the garden. They chatted as they strolled. They talked about the things that happened in the past, some of their experiences during cultivation, some of their experiences in life, and even some of their future. They talked until the sky was dark, but they were still not satisfied. The period of time when I was under the influence of the art of ignorance was the most painful and darkest days of my life. Let us use me to threaten by you and Lin. They sacrificed too much to protect me. Lu Zi held Qin Chuan's hand tightly. She said to Qin Chuan, "I miss our friends in the Star Dragon Federation." Qin Chuan nodded slightly. He said to Lu Zi, "I also miss my friends in the Star Dragon Federation very much. If there's a chance, I want to go back." Ever since he learned that Tron Nebula was destroyed by Zerg, Qin Chuan wanted to go back and investigate this matter. Then, he would find a chance to go back to the Banished Land and see his old friends. If we go back now, will we bring disaster to them? Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan and said with some hesitation, "If the Void Empire finds out about the Banished Land, they will be in danger." Qin Chuan sighed. He said to Lu Zi, "The Void Empire has an ally, and that is Zerg. Since Zerg knows about the Banished Land, then the Void Empire must also know about it. However, the laws of heaven and earth in the Banished Land are very special. No matter how powerful a person is, their realm will be suppressed to the great circle of the nascent soul realm. In this case, no matter how many people the Void Empire and Zerg send to the Banished Land, it will not be a good thing. Therefore, the Banished Land should be safe for the time being. If it weren't for the special laws of heaven and earth in the Banished Land that suppressed everyone's realm, Qin Chuan might not have been able to defeat Zerg's Red Vanguard, and he might not have been able to kill Kargad with the help of the Heavenly Light. Qin Chuan believed that over the years, Zerg might have launched many attacks on the Banished Land, but he firmly believed that Zerg would definitely not gain any benefits. "We can go back, but we need a suitable opportunity." Qin Chuan said to Lu Zi, "Now that you are at the peak of the Dongshu realm, try to break through to the great circle of the Dongshu realm as soon as possible and try to advance to the unification stage. When we have stronger power, we will have more say." Qin Chuan wanted to go back, but he didn't want to go back with Lu Zi and leave with only the two of them. He wanted to bring more people out and lead everyone into a wider universe. In the past, they had no place to live, but now it was different. Tron City had become a dead land, and it happened to be the first stop for the human race and the demon race when they returned to the universe. With his current strength, it was absolutely impossible for him to ask for Tron Nebula from the Celestial Cluster, but he believed that after he advanced to the unification stage, it would no longer be a difficult task. "Qin Chuan, whenever I am alone, I always feel lucky for the decision I made back then. Luzi looked at Qin Chuan affectionately. If I didn't choose to leave the banished land with you and come to the outside world, I wouldn't have seen such a wonderful universe and realized the vastness and power of this world. Qin Chuan smiled slightly and nodded. I also often feel lucky that I made the decision to leave the banished land and explore the universe. Otherwise, I may be under pressure from Zerg's attack now. I will never see how wonderful the world of the divine transformation stage is, let alone have the opportunity to comprehend Tao runes and reach where I am today step by step. As they chatted, the two returned to the cultivation palace. Luzi had her own bedroom here, but Sharmila deliberately did not make any arrangements for Qin Chuan. When they walked into the bedroom, Qin Chuan and Luzi realized this matter. Qin Chuan scratched his head and said to Luzi, "Have a good rest. I happen to have a lot of new battle formations to comprehend. I will cultivate in the cultivation room at night. If you need anything, just call me." Luzi nodded gently and said, "Then go ahead." After Qin Chuan turned and left, Luzi glanced faintly at Qin Chuan's back that was about to disappear around the corner and muttered in a low voice, "What a fool." Chapter 11:11. In the process of absorbing Tao runes over the past 2 months, the rune sword had already fed Qin Chuan the Tao runes and battle formations of various attributes, namely the monstrous waves of water attribute, the metal tide of metal attribute, the flying sand and rolling stones of earth attribute, and the rainbow light of light attribute. Without exception, these battle formations were all level 6 battle formations. As Qin Chuan's strength increased, these battle formations would grow into level 7 battle formations. As for the Tao runes of space attribute, they were the last to be absorbed. Therefore, the rune sword had completely absorbed them tonight and could feed the Tao runes and battle formations back to Qin Chuan. Path of void shattering, void shattering. Qin Chuan murmured in a low voice. He couldn't help but reveal a joyful expression because void shattering wasn't a battle formation, but a consummate skill like Lei Fa. With Lei Fa as a precedent, Qin Chuan believed that the power of void shattering would never disappoint him. However, due to the talent rune, Qin Chuan could rapidly master Lei Fa, but he couldn't master void shattering. He had to learn and research it slowly. Fortunately, Qin Chuan didn't lack time. After an entire night of research, Qin Chuan finally had a rough understanding of what kind of profound meaning shattering the void was. As for truly mastering shattering the void, it would probably take a long time. When Qin Chuan walked out of the cultivation room and was about to check on Luzi, he discovered that she was preparing breakfast in the dining room. Looking at Luzi in an apron humming a cheerful tune and tinkering with things, Qin Chuan didn't know why, but he instantly relaxed his tense nerves. For a moment, he really wanted to continue living like this and ignore everything else. However, this thought only appeared for a moment before it was dismissed by Qin Chuan. He still had a lot of things to do, so it wasn't the time to be greedy for a tender home. "You finished cultivating?" At this time, Luzi also noticed Qin Chuan's appearance. She held a thin slice of meat in her hand and waved it at Qin Chuan, indicating for Qin Chuan to come over and taste the delicacy. Qin Chuan smiled as he walked to Luzi's side. He let Luzi feed him the meat. Then he smiled and said to Luzi, "This should be the Tian people's unique meat, right? It tastes good." It is indeed Tianyang. In the Tian people, Tianyang is provided for the core members to eat. We are basking in Sharmila's glory. Luzi smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "After breakfast, let's go see by you." "All right." Qin Chuan smiled and agreed. At this time, his optical computer suddenly lit up. It was Night Serenity's call request. Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly. After answering the call, he asked Night Serenity, "What happened?" "Qin Chuan, the situation is not good. Chubby and the others have all lost contact." Night Serenity said to Qin Chuan in a serious tone, "They have a contract with you. If they died, you should be able to sense it." Qin Chuan frowned slightly and said, "They are not dead. The contract he signed with Chubby and the others was not broken. In other words, Chubby and the others were still alive." With the contract in place, Chubby and the others had no reason to lose contact. In other words, it was very likely that Chubby and the others were in trouble. What were they doing before they lost contact? Qin Chuan frowned and asked, "Did you arrange any tasks for them?" Knight Serenity seemed to have thought of something and said in surprise, "Before this, they were investigating Argentin's attack. Could it be that they encountered the Void Empire's spies?" Qin Chuan was slightly stunned when he heard Knight Serenity's answer. He said with some astonishment, "Even Argentin, the person who was attacked, could not confirm the identity of the other party. What would they have found out?" Lu Zi overheard the conversation between Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity. She said to Qin Chuan, "Don't forget that although we know that Argentin doesn't know anything, the attackers might not know that we don't know anything. Maybe Chubby and the others accidentally discovered something, and the attackers thought that we followed the clues to find them. That's why they made the first move and took control of Chubby and the others." Qin Chuan fell into deep thought when he heard Lu Zi's reasonable analysis. He asked Knight Serenity, "When was the last time you contacted Chubby, and where are they?" Knight Serenity replied, 2 days ago, in the 99th district. Qin Chuan's mood when he came to the 99th district again was completely different from before. Last time, he came to satisfy his curiosity, which was equivalent to sightseeing. This time, he came to save people and find out the truth. Argentin was seriously injured, and Bai needed someone to take care of her. Therefore, the person who accompanied Qin Chuan this time was still Knight Serenity. Knight Serenity suggested to Qin Chuan, "Actually, we can go directly to the Chaos Overlord and ask him to help us find Chubby and the others. After all, the 99th district is the Chaos Overlord's territory. It's much more convenient for him to act here. If we ask the Chaos Overlord for help in the name of the Tian people, he won't refuse us." Qin Chuan shook his head when he heard Knight Serenity's words. He asked, "What's the strength of Chubby and the others?" Knight Serenity replied subconsciously, "The exceptional Void Realm. 7 out of 10 of them are at the exceptional Void Realm. The other 3 are at the peak of the exceptional Void Realm." Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity and asked, "Then let me ask you, in the 99th district, what kind of person can restrain the 10 of them without giving them any chance?" Knight Serenity was stunned for a moment. Then he reacted and said in surprise, "You're suspecting the Chaos Overlord?" Qin Chuan nodded and said to Knight Serenity, "In the 99th district, besides the Chaos Overlord, I can't think of anyone else who can do this. Although there's no reason to suspect him, we'd better be careful." Knight Serenity took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said, "Now that you mention it, I do think the Chaos Overlord is very suspicious. Since he reached the combination stage and became an Overlord 1,000 years ago, he has been very mysterious. He rarely comes in contact with others and rarely attends the Overlord's gatherings. But before he reached the combination stage, he wasn't such a person." Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity curiously and asked, "Can you tell me more about it?" Knight Serenity replied, "As far as I know, before the Chaos Overlord reached the combination stage 1,000 years ago, he was a very domineering and arrogant person. He called himself the King of Chaos. He often appeared in various occasions and caused a lot of trouble. Later, when he reached the form synthesis stage, everyone thought he would become even more arrogant and despotic. However, to everyone's surprise, he chose to stay in the most chaotic area, the 99th district. Since then, he rarely showed himself outside and almost disappeared without a trace. Only those who come to the 99th district often mention him and think of his existence." Chapter 11-12. After hearing Knight Serenity's description, Qin Chuan could basically conclude that there must be something wrong with the Chaos Overlord. A very arrogant person who became an overlord of the universe after advancing to the combination stage should have become even more arrogant and egotistical under normal circumstances. However, the Chaos Overlord became very mysterious and low-key, which didn't make sense and didn't make sense. Although it wasn't impossible for his personality to change drastically, In Qinchuan's opinion, it should be very difficult for this kind of thing to happen to a cultivator, especially a powerhouse who had lived for hundreds or thousands of years. This kind of person's personality and way of doing things had long been solidified. Unless they encountered a great stimulus, it would be very difficult for them to change. Before Qinchuan felt that there was something wrong with the Chaos Overlord, Knight Serenity didn't think so. Now, after being reminded by Qinchuan, Knight Serenity immediately felt that there was indeed a big problem with the Chaos Overlord. She looked at Qinchuan and said, "Since the Chaos Overlord entered the 99th district, he has become very low-key and mysterious, so much so that after a period of time, everyone ignored his existence. This just shows that there is something wrong with the Chaos Overlord. He deliberately made everyone ignore his existence so that it would be convenient for him to act secretly." Qinchuan nodded and said to Knight Serenity, "Your analysis is very reasonable, but all of this is just our guess. Before we see the Chaos Overlord, everything is still uncertain." While they were talking, Qinchuan and Knight Serenity had already left the spaceship and set foot on the port of the 99th district. Qinchuan glanced ahead and asked Knight Serenity, "Where does the Chaos Overlord usually stay?" Knight Serenity looked at Qinchuan with some embarrassment and said, "I don't know. In fact, most people only know that the Chaos Overlord is in the 99th district. Very few people know where exactly the Chaos Overlord is." Qinchuan laughed and replied, "That's really mysterious. In that case, let's directly look for the most luxurious and tallest building in the 99th district. With the Chaos Overlord's status, it's not too much to live in such a place. Other than him, no one else in the 99th district is qualified to live in such a place." Knight Serenity looked at Qinchuan with a strange gaze and said, "In the 99th district, the tallest and most luxurious building is the black market auction." Qinchuan was stunned and said with some surprise, "Black market auction?" Knight Serenity nodded and said to Qinchuan, "Although the biggest auction in Stansos is in the 30th district, there are also auctions in the 99th district. Moreover, the items that appear in the 99th district's black market auctions are usually stolen goods of unknown origins or things that are more sinister." Qinchuan understood. The items that were auctioned in the 30th district's black market auctions were usually of normal origins and did not have any problems. The items that were auctioned in the 99th district's black market auctions were stolen goods or sinister items that could not be accepted by the general public. They were considered to be items from the dark side and could not be shown in public. "Then let's go to this black market auction and take a look." Qinchuan asked Knight Serenity, "When is the next auction?" "At night," Knight Serenity replied. "There are still about 6 hours left." Qinchuan nodded and said, "Then let's just walk around the black market and buy a ticket." Just like that, 6 hours passed in a casual stroll. When the black market auction was about to start, Qinchuan and Knight Serenity entered the auction site with tickets that they had bought at a high price. What surprised Qinchuan was that the auction site was much simpler than he had imagined. Not only was there no private space that could be created by the space folding technology, there was not even the most basic private room. Everyone sat in a huge circular hall that could be seen at a glance. After Qinchuan and Knight Serenity found their seats and sat down, they began to talk telepathically. This auction site is a little too simple. It's even worse than Tron Nebula. Qinchuan looked at the people in all kinds of robes that covered their faces and said to Knight Serenity, "Is there a saying?" Knight Serenity nodded and said to Qinchuan, "There are no rules in the 99th district, and it's famous for its chaos. If you can't buy what you want in this place, you can follow the person who bought it and rob him." Qinchuan was a little surprised and asked, "Is it that crazy?" Knight Serenity nodded again and said seriously, "This is the 99th district." Qinchuan looked around and could only sense the cultivation level of a small number of people. Most of them were wearing cloaks with the ability to isolate spiritual energy from probing, so he couldn't sense their cultivation level. As for the others that he could sense, most of them were at Dongshu realm completion. These people were extremely confident in their own strength. As long as they weren't facing a great being at the level of a universe overlord, They had nothing to fear. Ta-ta-ta. In the quiet auction site, there was a series of footsteps. A figure covered in a black robe stepped onto the auction stage. It seemed that he was the auctioneer today. However, Qin Chuan did not expect that the auctioneer would disguise his appearance so that no one could see through him. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the auction will now begin. The first item is the Soul Mourning Banner. As he spoke, a long black banner was inserted on the auction stage. It emitted a gloomy and evil aura, and one could vaguely see countless wronged souls wailing inside. The Soul Mourning Banner is a middle-grade saint weapon. The starting price is 1 million star stones. The auction starts now. After the mysterious auctioneer finished speaking, the site fell silent for a moment. Then, someone started to bid. The price of the Soul Mourning Banner slowly rose from 1 million star stones to 14 million star stones. However, this was clearly not the limit of the Soul Mourning Banner. Still, no one was willing to bid anymore. Seeing this, Knight Serenity explained to Qin Chuan via voice transmission. According to common sense, the price of the Soul Mourning Banner should be around 20 million star stones. However, no one is willing to bid such a high price for the Soul Mourning Banner. Therefore, these people have all thought of another way to obtain the Soul Mourning Banner, and that is to snatch it. Hearing Yi Yu's words, Qin Chuan subconsciously turned his gaze towards the person who had bid 14 million star stones. It was a person whose entire body was covered in a black robe. There were many people present who were dressed like him. In a situation where one could not use their mental power to lock onto the other party, it was very difficult to keep an eye on him among so many people. In the end, the price of the Soul Mourning Banner was fixed at 14 million star stones. It was won by the mysterious person. Everyone present was silent and did not make any sound. They patiently waited for the second item to be auctioned. Chapter 11:13. While everyone's attention was focused on the auction item, Qin Chuan was observing the mysterious auctioneer's every move. Knight Serenity noticed that Qin Chuan did not care about the auction item at all. Instead, he was observing the mysterious auctioneer. She asked Qin Chuan in confusion, "Do you think there's something wrong with this auctioneer? Why do you keep staring at him?" Qin Chuan shook his head and replied, "I'm just curious. Don't you think this auctioneer is too calm and rational?" Qin Chuan recalled the auctions he had attended before and said to Knight Serenity, "The auctioneers I've seen before all put their heart and soul into the auction. They all hoped that the auction item could be sold for a sky-high price and spared no effort in promoting it. However, this mysterious auctioneer didn't care at all. Other than briefly introducing the auction item at the beginning, he kept silent until the end of the auction. He didn't care at all about how much the auction item was sold for." Qin Chuan then turned to look at Knight Serenity and asked, "Is it because it's a black market auction?" After all, this was Qin Chuan's first time attending a black market auction. He wasn't sure if this was the normal operation of a black market auction or if it was a problem with the auctioneer. Knight Serenity didn't know how to answer Qin Chuan's question. After seriously recalling the few black market auctions she had attended in the past, she said to Qin Chuan, "I've seen other auctioneers before, but most of them weren't much different from the auctioneers outside." Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "In that case, he's been like this since a long time ago. His calmness shouldn't have anything to do with the black market auction. It's his nature." Qin Chuan then turned to look at Knight Serenity and asked, "Can you arrange it for me? I'd like to meet this auctioneer." Knight Serenity was a little surprised and asked in confusion, "Why do you want to see him? A guy who's been an auctioneer for so many years should know something." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Knight Serenity, "I think he should be a good breakthrough point." Knight Serenity frowned and said to Qin Chuan, "Since this person can be the auctioneer of the black market auction, he must have some status in Section 99. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to pry open his mouth." Qin Chuan chuckled and said to Knight Serenity, "Everyone has a weakness. If these are useless, it means that it's time to use force." Seeing that Qin Chuan had made up his mind, Knight Serenity didn't try to persuade him anymore. Anyway, with her, and Qinchuan's strength. Even if they caused some trouble, they could deal with it calmly. They weren't afraid of messing it up. Besides, Qinchuan never did things that he wasn't confident in, so Knight Serenity decided to believe in Qinchuan's decision. The auction didn't last long. After 4 hours, the auction came to an end. It was already late at night. While the others were thinking about how to snatch the treasures from the people who had bought them, Qinchuan and Knight Serenity had quietly left the scene and walked toward the backstage of the auction. It could be said that there was no obstruction along the way. All the guards had succumbed to Yi Yu's powerful aura, which was unique to the overlord of the body integration stage. When Qinchuan and Yi Yu arrived backstage, they were surprised to see that the auctioneer was nowhere to be seen. Qinchuan glanced at the backstage and said to Knight Serenity, "He won't come." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Knight Serenity asked curiously, "How do you know? There's something wrong with him." Qinchuan looked at Knight Serenity. "He doesn't dare to appear in front of us. He's deliberately avoiding us. Just now, I deliberately asked you to suppress those guards with the pressure of the overlord of the form synthesis stage, not only so that we could get to the backstage faster, but also to test the auctioneer. He sensed your aura, so he chose to retreat." Knight Serenity was stunned for a moment and said, doubtfully, "I controlled my aura very well just now. Only people in the same stage as me could sense my aura. Is he also a powerhouse of the form synthesis stage?" Qinchuan laughed and said, "What if the auctioneer is the chaos overlord?" This time, Knight Serenity was completely stunned. The auctioneer is the chaos overlord? How is that possible? Knight Serenity subconsciously wanted to refute Qinchuan, but Qinchuan didn't give Knight Serenity a chance to speak. He asked directly, "When did this auctioneer first appear in the black market auction?" "I guess it must be after the chaos overlord reached the form synthesis stage." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Knight Serenity frowned slightly and said, "This matter happened thousands of years ago. I'm afraid it's very difficult to investigate it now." Then ask these guards. Qinchuan turned to look at the guards and asked, "What's the name of the auctioneer just now? When did he appear in the black market auction as an auctioneer?" In the face of Qinchuan's question, the timid guard answered almost without hesitation, "Sir, the auctioneer's name is Enchantment. As for when he appeared in the black market auction as an auctioneer, I don't know, because when I came here as a guard, that sir had already arrived." Qinchuan asked, "How many years have you been a guard here?" 200 years. Qinchuan nodded slightly and said to the guard, "Who's the guard here for the longest time?" "It's the villain," the guard replied. "The guards here change every 200 years. I was supposed to leave here tomorrow." Speaking of this, the guard's expression was extremely helpless. If he had known that he would encounter such a thing on the last day of his guard work, he would have asked for leave and not come. Qinchuan thought for a while and asked, "A long time ago, did the guards of the black market auction change often? How many times has it been changed before?" Hearing Qinchuan's question, the guard replied, "If you count the villain, this is the 5th time the guards have changed." Hearing the guard's answer, Qinchuan looked at Knight Serenity and said, "The guards change every 200 years. This is the 5th time. In other words, it has been 1,000 years. When did the Chaos Overlord reach the form synthesis stage?" "More than 1,000 years. To be specific, it should be more than 1,000 years. No more than 10 years. Knight Serenity gave a very specific answer, and the black market auction happened to start changing guard around that time. If these two things were looked at separately, there would be no problem. But if they were looked at together, there would be a problem. At this time, thinking of Qinchuan's previous guess, Knight Serenity couldn't help but take a deep breath. If this mysterious auctioneer was the Chaos Overlord, then for what purpose did he choose to hide his true identity in such a way? Void Empire Lurker. This was a very obvious answer. Chapter 11:14. In the black market. The mysterious man in a black robe walked out of the gate of the black market. After looking in the direction, he jumped on a shuttle and went straight to the port. When the shuttle arrived at the port, the mysterious man stepped off the shuttle and walked towards the port. His footsteps were hurried, as if he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Just as he was about to enter the port, his footsteps suddenly stopped because there was someone in front of him blocking his path. Qin Chuan looked at the mysterious man who stopped and asked with a smile, "You seem surprised to see me?" The mysterious man slowly raised his head and looked at Qin Chuan. He asked, "How did you find me?" Knight's serenity became vigilant when he heard the mysterious man's words. This meant that the mysterious man had admitted his identity. They had found the spy of the Void Empire. Qin Chuan sighed when he heard the mysterious man's words. He said, "Sometimes I hope that my guess is wrong. No one wants to see all the overlords of the form synthesis stage on their side become enemies." The mysterious man slowly took off his hood and revealed a square face in front of Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity. Qin Chuan didn't recognize him, but Knight Serenity recognized him. He was the Chaos Overlord, or in other words, the spy of the Void Empire, Enchantment. "Why did you kill them?" Qin Chuan looked at Enchantment. "You could have left quietly, but you killed Chubby and the others before you left. They have a contractual connection with me. Now that we are so close, I can easily find you through the power of the contract." And Kuin's face couldn't help but reveal a wisp of a gloomy expression when he heard Qin Chuan, and he said, "I originally thought that you'd locked onto me since a long time ago and intentionally waited here for me. I never expected that you actually exposed yourself while I was killing those people." Qin Chuan nodded. He took the opportunity to stab Kuin in the heart. He continued, "We didn't expect you to be the spy of the Void Empire, but you suddenly caught Chubby and the others, so we had to shift our attention to you. You have been quiet for thousands of years. Why can't you continue to be quiet?" And Kuin took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said, "With you around, how can I be quiet? But this is good. Since you took the initiative to come to me, let me get rid of you before I leave." And Kuin raised his hand and fiercely tore off the flesh on his body. He tore the body that originally belonged to the chaotic overlord into pieces and presented his original body to Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity. His aura also soared with the appearance of his original body. Knight Serenity looked at Kuin with a grave expression. Kuin's aura was so strong that it completely exceeded her expectations. He had reached the late combination stage. Even if she and Qin Chuan joined forces, they might not be a match for Kuin. Qin Chuan and Kuin's strength is at least equivalent to the late combination stage. The two of us are no match for him. Knight Serenity was very familiar with her own fighting prowess. Although Qin Chuan could defeat AI Dan and AI Rune, one of them was equivalent to the early combination stage, while the other was equivalent to the middle combination stage. Even if the two of them joined forces, they would not be a match for the late combination stage. Every small increase in the combination stage would greatly enhance one's fighting prowess. "We seem to have gone too far." Qin Chuan grinned at Knight Serenity and said, "I thought he was sneaky and his strength was at most equivalent to AI Rue's. I didn't expect his strength to be equivalent to the late combination stage. He is probably a late third-grade martial warrior or a wizard. Look at his strong body. He is obviously a martial warrior. But why are we talking about this now?" Knight Serenity did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Let's think of a countermeasure. Then let's run." Before Qin Chuan finished speaking, he turned around and ran toward the entrance of the harbor. Knight Serenity followed closely behind him, and Kuin smiled disdainfully. His body flashed, and he easily passed by Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity, blocking the entrance of the harbor. "You too. Where do you think you are going?" And Kuin sneered at Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity. His body flashed again, and he appeared in front of Qin Chuan. He raised his hand and punched Qin Chuan in the chest. Sizzle. Accompanied by a flash of lightning, Qin Chuan's figure quickly appeared in the distance. He lowered his head and looked at the torn clothes on his chest and the red fist mark on his chest. His face couldn't help but become a little ugly. He had already used the lightning escape technique when Kuin's figure flickered. He didn't expect that he would still be hit. If he had been a little slower, Kuin's punch might have seriously injured him on the spot. "Didn't anyone tell you not to be distracted during a battle?" Nkuen's voice suddenly sounded behind Qinchuan. When Qinchuan realized that something was wrong and was about to dodge, Nkuen had already raised his hand and pressed on his shoulder. In an instant, a turbulent void energy rushed toward Qinchuan, almost devouring Qinchuan. At this moment, a blazing dragon's breath appeared in front of Nkuen. Nkuen raised his hand and casually waved it, dispersing the dragon's breath. He completely ignored Night Serenity and looked at Qinchuan, who was being eroded by the void energy. He chuckled and said, "I'll spare your life for now." After saying that, Nkuen casually threw Qinchuan to Night Serenity, who was not far away, and then disappeared in a flash. Night Serenity hugged Qinchuan and looked around vigilantly. After confirming that Nkuen had left, she lowered her head and looked at Qinchuan. When she saw Qinchuan's state, she could not help but be shocked. At this moment, Qinchuan's entire body was enveloped by the void energy. The void energy was pervasive and had seeped into every inch of Qinchuan's body, even his soul. If the void energy was allowed to invade Qinchuan's body, Qinchuan might turn into a void creature after a while. Just as Night Serenity was about to contact the Tian people to see if they could save Qinchuan, a dazzling red light suddenly lit up inside Qinchuan's body. The appearance of this red light caused the void energy to stop eroding Qinchuan's body. Soon, the void energy was forced by the Nirvana flame to slowly converge on Qinchuan's chest, condensing into a lotus imprint on Qinchuan's chest. Cough, cough. Qinchuan suddenly coughed violently and sat up. He took a deep breath, and his face was full of horror. "Qinchuan, are you okay?" Seeing that Qinchuan had woken up, Night Serenity immediately asked about Qinchuan's situation. She was most worried that the current Qinchuan was no longer the Qinchuan she was familiar with. Hearing Night Serenity's words, Qinchuan shook his head and said to Night Serenity, "I'm fine for the time being." While speaking, Qinchuan looked down at the void lotus imprint on his chest. If he could not resolve the void energy that could erupt at any time, then he would be in trouble. Chapter 11:15. Qinchuan put on a cloak and covered the void lotus in front of his chest. Then, he said to Night Serenity, "Don't tell anyone about this." Hearing Qinchuan's order, Night Serenity said with some hesitation, "Are you really Qinchuan?" "Of course I am Qinchuan. I know what you're worried about. Don't worry, before this lotus erupts, I will be fine." Qinchuan said helplessly, "It's my fault for being too careless. I overestimated myself and underestimated my opponent." If he had known that Nkuen was so terrifying, Qinchuan would not have appeared here with Night Serenity so confidently. Night Serenity looked at Qinchuan worriedly and asked, "What was that red light just now?" Qinchuan knew that if he did not explain these things clearly, Night Serenity would not be at ease. He sighed and said to Night Serenity with a complicated tone, "That was the Nirvana flame. The Nirvana flame that only belonged to the Phoenix. If it was not for the Nirvana flame that had been lurking in Qinchuan's body suddenly erupting at this crucial moment, and helping Qinchuan resist the corrosion from the void energy, he might have become a void creature by now." Night Serenity was not unfamiliar with the name Nirvana Flame. She looked at Qinchuan with astonishment. Suddenly, she was filled with curiosity about Qinchuan's background. A person with the bloodline of a true dragon actually had the Nirvana Flame in his body. This was too mysterious. Qinchuan was not in the mood to satisfy his curiosity. He said to Night Serenity, "Some things can't be explained clearly. You just need to know that if I am really completely corroded by the void energy, I will become a brainless void creature and will not talk so much nonsense to you." Yi nodded tactfully and didn't continue asking. Instead, he took advantage of the fact that the situation here hadn't been discovered and left the port ahead of time. As for Nkuen's matter, they would naturally tell the Sky Clan. After returning to the spaceship, Qinchuan took off his cloak. He looked down at the lotus on his chest and focused on the layer of red seal that was evolved from the Nirvana flame. He could feel that this power could last for at most 3 years. If he could not find a way to deal with this void lotus within 3 years, he would be in danger. Nirvana, I owe you another life. When the Tian people received the news from Qinchuan, they immediately sent a large number of people to the 99th district. After collecting evidence from various sources, they finally confirmed that the Chaos Overlord had died 1,000 years ago. During this time, the person who had replaced the Chaos Overlord to control the 99th district was Enkuan, a late third-grade warrior from the Void Empire. Now, the Tian people had ordered Stanos to enter a state of full martial law. An enemy with strength equivalent to the late stage of the combination realm was extremely destructive. If he attacked Stanos recklessly, it would cause great damage to Stanos. Before they found Enkuin and dealt with Enkuin, this hidden danger, Stanos would not be peaceful for a long time in the future. At this time, Qinchuan was alone in the practice room, trying to think of a way to deal with the void lotus on his chest. Sizzle. Qinchuan held a ball of thunder in his hand and constantly released the power of thunder at the void lotus on his chest. He wanted to use the violent power of thunder to destroy the void lotus. But unfortunately, the void lotus was completely unmoved. When Qinchuan tried to cut the void lotus from his body with the power of space, he found that the void lotus was connected to his blood vessels. Even if he cut off a piece of his flesh, he could not remove the void lotus completely. In the end, Qinchuan found that he had no way to deal with the void lotus. He could only rely on the nirvana flame to temporarily control the void lotus. At that time, I was in a very dangerous situation. It was almost a hopeless situation, so I activated the nirvana flame. Qinchuan looked at the void lotus on his chest and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. If he could reach the form synthesis stage, he might be able to borrow the strength of Leifa to solve the problem of the void lotus. However, it was too difficult to reach the form synthesis stage in 3 years. Even with Qinchuan's talent, he didn't have the confidence to do it. It all depends on the effort. No matter what, I have to work hard to find a way. Qinchuan sighed. He put on his clothes and walked out of the practice room. When he came to the living room, Lu Zi, who was reading in the living room, smiled at him and asked, "Are you done with your practice?" Qinchuan nodded. He didn't tell Lu Zi about the void lotus. He didn't tell Lu Zi about it. Besides making Lu Zi worry about him, it wouldn't have any positive effect, so it was better not to tell her. After chatting with Lu Zi for a while, Qinchuan returned to the practice room. This time, he was going to go into seclusion for a long time. Without anything else, Qinchuan's first priority was to practice and improve his strength. Only by becoming stronger could he find a better way to solve the void lotus. Otherwise, he could only wait for death. Area 82. Enkuan, who had disguised himself again, sat on the balcony. He looked at the artificial blue fields and clouds in the distance leisurely. He enjoyed the comfortable feeling of being bathed in the artificial sun's light. It was very comfortable. Opposite Enkuan sat a figure covered in a gray robe. If Argentin was here, she would definitely recognize that this person was the expert who stopped her in Tron Nebula. Why did you let him go? The man in gray looked at Enkuan, seemingly puzzled. Don't you think it's very interesting? Enkuan chuckled and said to the gray-robed man, "The ancient human clan and the ancient demon clan have disappeared for countless years. Now, they are relying on the barren land of exile to survive. They should have lived in that environment until the end of time. But who would have thought that an outstanding genius like Qinchuan would appear in such a harsh environment? It's unbelievable." The man in gray was silent for a moment and said, "You shouldn't have let Qinchuan go. He is a person who is good at creating miracles." And Kuan smiled faintly and said to the gray-robed man, "My thoughts are the opposite of yours. I feel that not long after, he will be completely corroded by the power of the void and become a void creature, becoming my companion." Even the human emperor back then was unable to resist the corrosion of the power of the void, let alone Qinchuan. The man in gray frowned and said, "The human emperor is still alive?" "Of course." And Kuan smiled. "As long as he is alive, the fate of the human race will always be suppressed by the empire. They will never be able to make a comeback unless someone can replace him as the new human emperor. And now, the only person who has the hope of becoming the new human emperor has been eroded by the void force. The last hope of the human race is gone. Hearing in Kuin's words, the man in gray fell into a long silence. Chapter 11:16. Other than when he was trapped in the Sword God's ruins and was unable to leave, Qin Chuan rarely spent a large amount of time cultivating in seclusion. This time, due to the matter of the Void Lotus, Qin Chuan had been in seclusion in the cultivation room for a full year. During this year, apart from studying various types of battle formations, Qin Chuan's biggest achievement was to raise his cultivation from the middle Dongshu stage to the late Dongshu stage. For ordinary cultivators, it was almost unimaginable to make a small breakthrough in 1 year. However, for Qin Chuan, this improvement was far from enough. His goal was to reach the form synthesis stage within 3 years. But now, after a year, he had only made a small breakthrough. There was still the peak of the Dongshu stage and the peak of the Dongshu stage. He was still far away from the form synthesis stage. During this year of closed-door cultivation, Qin Chuan realized that if he didn't have a great opportunity, it would be very difficult for him to reach the form synthesis stage in the remaining 2 years. Therefore, he decided to leave his closed-door cultivation and go out to find his own opportunity. When Qin Chuan came out of the cultivation room, it was very quiet. There was no one in the room. He didn't contact Lu Zi or Night Serenity. Instead, he left his room alone and wandered around aimlessly. Then, he met Thelon. When Thelon saw Qin Chuan, he was slightly stunned. Then, he smiled and said, "I haven't seen you for a year. Your cultivation has increased again. You've made great progress." Qin Chuan shook his head and said, "This is nothing. It's still far from my expectations." According to Qin Chuan's plan, you should have reached the peak of the Dongshu stage in 1 year. However, there was still a big gap between him and the peak of the Dongshu stage. Tai Long frowned slightly when he saw that Qin Chuan was not satisfied with the progress of breaking through a small realm in a year. Cultivation is not something that can be accomplished overnight. You should know that more haste makes less speed. Among the younger generation, you are already an outstanding talent. It can be said that you have reached the limit. Qin Chuan understood what Thelon was saying, but under the threat of the Lotus of Void, it was useless. Seeing Qin Chuan's silence, Thelon said to Qin Chuan, "Actually, if you want to increase your strength as soon as possible, it's not like there's no shortcut, it's just that it's very dangerous." Qin Chuan was curious about Thelon's shortcut. He looked at Thelon and asked, "What is this shortcut you're talking about? Could it be some kind of evil technique?" Thelon shook his head and replied, "Of course I can't recommend you to practice some kind of evil technique. The shortcut I'm talking about is lingering on the edge of life and death. Dig out your own potential and push your limits again and again. This way, your strength will increase by leaps and bounds in a short period of time, and there won't be any repercussions." Hearing Thelon's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but think of the one against 1,000 challenge he had participated in the mountain city. The shortcut Thelon mentioned sounded similar to the one against 1,000 challenge. Qin Chuan looked at Thelon and asked expectantly, "How do I do it?" Thelon replied, "In 1 month, there will be an exchange between the Celestial Cluster and the Deus Cluster. During this exchange, there will be a competition between the younger generation. You can participate and see the strength of the younger generation of the Protoss." The younger generation of the Protoss? Hearing Thelon's words, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "Are the younger generation of the Protoss very strong?" Thelon chuckled and said to Qin Chuan, "Let's not talk about strength for now. At least in terms of self-esteem and arrogance, the Protoss is undeniably number one, whether it's the older generation or the younger generation. And as one of the most powerful ancient races, the younger generation of the Protoss can't be weak. The strongest among them should be the same as me, at the early stage of the unification stage." Qin Chuan knew very little about the Protoss. It could even be said that he didn't know anything about them. If there was an opportunity to interact with the younger generation of the Protoss, Chuan wouldn't want to miss it. But shouldn't this exchange be just a competition? Why would it be lingering on the edge of life and death? Without waiting for Chuan to ask the question in his heart, Thelon said to Chuan, "Do you know why only the younger generation under the unification stage will participate in the exchange?" Chuan asked curiously, "Why?" Thelon looked at Chuan subtly and replied, "Because the younger generation of the Dongshu stage will die. Neither the Tian people nor the Protoss will feel sorry for them." Hearing Thelon's explanation, Chuan was slightly taken aback. He asked, "So, among the Tian people and the Protoss, only the overlords of the unification stage are the true core?" Thelon nodded and replied, "Although it sounds very heartless and cruel, it's the truth." Chuan frowned and asked, "What about Sharmilla?" Thelon heard Chuan mention Sharmilla and said with a smile, "Sharmilla is different from the others. She has the royal bloodline." "I see." Chuan nodded and said to Thelon, "I can understand your way of thinking, but that doesn't mean I'll accept it. In the world of cultivation, the weak were prey to the strong." Chuan wouldn't sympathize with the weak, but he also wouldn't treat the weak as objects that could be sacrificed at will. Therefore, he could understand the way the Tian people thought, but he wouldn't accept or agree with it. Thelon could also understand Chuan's behavior. After all, in ancient times, whether it was the human race or the humanoid race, all living things were equal. It was normal for Chuan, as a humanoid, to inherit this way of thinking. As friends, it was good to seek common ground while reserving differences. Thelon looked at Chuan and said, "I can recommend you as one of the representatives of the Celestial Cluster to participate in this conference. Although you're very strong, comparable to a mid-body integration stage overlord, the geniuses of the Protoss are definitely not weak. I believe you'll be able to achieve good results in this conference." Chuan asked curiously after hearing Thelon's words, "If I kill too many Protoss, will I be targeted by the Protoss?" Thelon laughed and said to Chuan, "If you have the ability, then go ahead and kill as many as you want. The Protoss won't be angry because you killed one of their younger generation. They'll only think that their younger generation is weak. Of course, this is under the premise that you're also from the younger generation. If an older generation powerhouse kills a younger Protoss, then the Protoss won't rest until they're dead. Then I'll have to trouble you to sign me up." Chuan said to Thelon, "If there's anything else, you can contact me directly through the photon computer." Chapter 11:17. Are you also going to participate in the exchange? Luzi looked at Chuan in surprise. Chuan was also surprised when he heard this. He asked, "Are you also going to participate in the exchange?" Luzi nodded and said to Chuan, "Sharmilla is also going to participate in this exchange. I'm going to accompany her." Chuan frowned slightly and said to Luzi, "That's too dangerous. As far as I know, the church doesn't allow arbitrary killing. So what? I'm not weaker than an ordinary person. Plus, there's Sharmilla, and now there's you. We won't encounter any danger at all." Luzi said to Chuan, "I've always wanted to fight with people who are on par with me and test my own strength." Seeing LVZ's confidence and Chuan's confidence in his own strength, he didn't say anything else. Instead, he asked about the exchange. "I just came out of seclusion, so I don't know much about the exchange. Do you know why there's an exchange between the Tian people and the Protoss?" Luzi immediately explained to Chuan, "Because the Deus cluster and the Celestial cluster are adjacent, there's a certain amount of friction and interest disputes between the Protoss and the Tian people. The purpose of the exchange is to resolve these disputes. Neither the Tian people nor the Protoss can bear the impact of the fall of the older generation, so the younger generation becomes the main characters of the exchange." Hearing Luzi's explanation, Chuan's face showed a touch of understanding. He nodded slightly and asked, "How often is this exchange held? What are the rewards?" Luzi replied, "The exchange is held once every 100 years. As for the rewards, there's nothing special, but it's said that the final winner will get the opportunity to enter the ancient ruins." Ancient ruins. Hearing Luzi mention the ancient ruins, Qin Chuan immediately asked with concern, "Is it the ancient human ruins or the ancient demon ruins?" "I don't know the specifics. I only know that it's an ancient ruin. It depends on which ancient ruin will open," Lu Zi said to Qin Chuan. "After all, there are many ancient ruins in the universe. It's not just the ancient ruins of the human race and the devil race." Qin Chuan had heard with Cece mention ancient relics when he was in the Sinai star system. Once an ancient relic was opened, even universe overlords would participate in it. It was a grand event that attracted a lot of attention. Even if people of the younger generation had the opportunity to participate, they would only be able to broaden their horizons. It was still very difficult to compete with universe overlords for treasures. However, Qin Chuan wasn't too afraid as long as he didn't encounter an overlord in the late combination stage. Therefore, he was very interested in the ancient ruins that would be opened soon. Half a month later, Qin Chuan and the others set foot on the celestial star, which was located at the border between the celestial cluster and the Deus cluster. The celestial star was located at the border between the celestial cluster and the Deus cluster. It was also the location of the exchange. There was a space on the celestial star called the lava world. The lava world was a vast space filled with volcanoes and magma. The living environment was extremely harsh. In this kind of battle, one would be greatly restricted. It was very difficult to exert one's full strength. On the way to the celestial star, Qin Chuan learned another piece of news from Lu Zi. The destruction of Turan capital had been left unsettled. Why was it left unsettled? Qin Chuan was a little surprised. It was clearly Zerg who destroyed Turan capital. Lu Zi sighed helplessly and said to Qin Chuan, "We all know that Zerg was responsible for the destruction of Turan capital, but we don't have conclusive evidence." Zerg insisted that it was the revenge of the Void Empire on Turan capital. He even used the corpse of the Void creature that the Tian people found in the ruins of Turan capital as evidence. Therefore, the Tian people couldn't do anything to Zerg. Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but turn gloomy. He didn't forget about the destruction of Turan capital during his closed-door training. He thought that the Tian people could get justice for the victims of Turan capital, but he didn't expect Zerg to be so shameless. Seeing Qin Chuan's ugly expression, Lu Zi held Qin Chuan's hand and said to Qin Chuan, "I know that you are very angry and sad. I feel the same way. We can't count on the Tian people to get justice for the victims, so we can only rely on ourselves. Remember this for the time being. Don't forget, when we have the strength to get justice for them, we will make Zerg pay for what he did." Qin Chuan heard this and asked, "Did Sharmila ask you to tell me this?" Lu Zi shook her head and replied, "Sharmila didn't say it explicitly, but she mentioned it vaguely when she told me the news. I understand what she meant. She doesn't want you to hate the Tian people because of this matter." Qin Chuan sighed and said to Lu Zi, "We are now living under someone else's roof. How can we be qualified to hate the Tian people?" "You are right. We can only wait until we find Zerg to settle this account in the future." Qin Chuan wanted to make Turan capital the first stronghold of the human race and the shifter race after they returned to the universe. So he must get justice for the people who died in Turan capital from Zerg and make Zerg pay a painful price. Only then can he feel at ease. "If there's a chance, I want to go to the Holy Cluster." Qin Chuan looked at Lu Zi. "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. If we want to destroy Zerg, we must understand Zerg. When this exchange is over, I will make a trip to the Saint Star Cluster." Lu Zi understood the meaning behind Qin Chuan's words and asked, "Are you going to act alone again and leave me behind?" Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Lu Zi, "It is very dangerous for me to go to the Holy Cluster alone. If I take you with me, it will be even more dangerous. Do you understand what I mean?" I knew it. No matter how hard I work, no matter how strong I become, I will always be a weakling in your eyes. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan firmly, and her tone was unprecedentedly serious. "I will prove to you in this conference that I am not weak at all. I am far stronger than you think, and I will never be a burden to you." Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan was a little helpless. He knew that this decision would definitely cause Lu Zi's dissatisfaction. But as Lu Zi said, if Lu Zi was really strong enough, he certainly wouldn't mind acting with Lu Zi. And this exchange meeting was undoubtedly a very good test. Chapter 11:18. After 10 days of flight, the aircraft carrier spaceship Heavenly King finally arrived at Celestial Planet. When the Heavenly King arrived at Celestial Planet, the people of the Protoss were already waiting for them. The Protoss were wearing similar white robes, with flower or golden rings on their heads. Their faces were solemn and dignified. Sharmila, who was traveling with Qin Chuan and Lu Zi, explained to them, "The Deus cluster is different from our celestial cluster. They have a unified religious belief. Whether it's the Protoss or outsiders, they all have to believe in the one true God, atheists. The Protoss are the spokespersons chosen by the one true God, atheists. They represent the one true God, atheists, to preach in the universe." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "Does the one true God, atheists, really exist?" Sharmila nodded and replied, "The one true God, atheists, wasn't casually made up by the Protoss. He's a real God. However, rather than calling him a god, it's better to call him an even more powerful cultivator." Qin Chuan's heart skipped a beat and asked, "Could he be a supreme existence at the tribulation stage?" Sharmila shook her head and said, "Although the tribulation stage is called a supreme existence, it's still a bit inferior to the one true God, atheists. As far as I know, the one true God, atheists, should be in existence one level higher than the tribulation stage. We call him the Zenith." Zenith? Hearing this name, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "What kind of existence is the Zenith?" "Flawless." Sharmila's explanation was simple and straightforward, giving Qin Chuan plenty of room for imagination. Lu Zi also asked curiously, "Among the Tian people, are there Zenith existences?" Sharmila nodded and said to Lu Zi, "Although I've never seen one, I'm sure there are Zenith existences among the Tian people. Not only us Tian people, but all the powerful ancient races have Zenith existences. The ancient races that disappeared in the universe, such as the human race and the demon race, declined because their Zenith existences fell." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but recall the golden figures standing on both sides of the Rune land that he had seen in his dream. Perhaps those two golden figures were the supreme existences of the human race and the demon race in antiquity. You don't have to think too much. The Zenith existences are unique. In other words, as long as the previous Zenith existences don't die, theoretically, the next generation of Zenith existences won't be born. Sharmila smiled at Qin Chuan and Lu Zi and said, "My dream is to become a supreme existence in the tribulation stage. As for the Zenith existences, I don't dare to imagine it at all." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Chuan thought of the golden figure he saw in his dream being dragged away by the void tentacles. If that golden figure was the Zenith existences of the ancient humans, perhaps that golden figure was still alive. Because of this, the human race had been trapped in the land of exile, unable to get a chance to rise again. Although I still have a long way to go before I can become a Zenith existence, I believe that I definitely have the potential to become one. Qin Chuan was very confident in himself, not only because of his talent, but also because of the opportunities he obtained. Whether it was the true dragon bloodline, the phoenix heartblood, the runic sword, or the celestial technique flipping sky seal, all of these proved that he was a person with great luck. As long as he didn't fall, it was very likely that he would be able to reach the peak and become a Zenith existence in the future. It's too early to think about this. It won't be too late to think about it after I reach the body fusion stage and touch the tribulation stage. Qin Chuan shook his head and threw these meaningless thoughts to the back of his mind. He began to seriously observe the members of the Protoss. He asked Sharmila, "How much do you know about the younger generation of the Protoss?" Upon hearing this, Sharmila replied to Qin Chuan, "Among the younger generation of the Protoss, The most powerful one is definitely the Church's divine child. The most powerful one among the divine children is called the Grand Divine Child. As far as I know, the Grand Divine Child of the Protoss generation is called Province, who is at the peak of the insightful void stage. Of course, anyone who can become a divine child is at the peak of the insightful void stage. In the Church, there are a total of 99 divine children. Moreover, these 99 divine children are all under 300 years old. If a divine child is over 300 years old and still hasn't reached the body fusion stage, then he will be stripped of his status as a divine child and become the most ordinary God servant. Qin Xuan asked curiously, then what does a divine child become after reaching the body fusion stage? Priest, Sharmila replied. In the Church of the Deus cluster, only overlords at the body fusion stage can become priests. Above priests are archbishops. Only overlords at the peak of the body fusion stage can become archbishops. Above archbishops is the Pope. The Pope is at the peak of the body fusion stage. Qin Xuan continued to ask, then what's above the Pope? The spokesperson of the one true God Atheist, who is also the master of the Protoss, Sharmila said to Qin Xuan, the master of the Protoss must be a supreme existence at the tribulation stage. After hearing Sharmila's introduction, Qin Xuan thought for a moment and asked, is the master of the Tian people also a supreme existence at the tribulation stage? What's the name of the supreme existence that corresponds to the one true God Atheist among the Tian people? Sharmila glanced at Qin Xuan and replied, the master of the Tian people is, of course, a supreme existence at the tribulation stage. As for the existence corresponding to the one true God Atheist, we always call him Heaven. Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Xuan was stunned. Heaven? Seeing Qin Xuan in a daze, Sharmila smiled and said to Qin Xuan, I know what you're thinking. When you swear to heaven, you're actually swearing to the supreme existence of the Tian people. This time, Qin Xuan was completely stunned. He couldn't help but ask, so, when we say that we'll be punished by heaven, it's actually heaven's punishment for us? Sharmila nodded and said to Qin Xuan, that's why we Tian people always attach importance to promises. We don't make promises easily, and we never break our promises. The power of oaths is the power of laws controlled by heaven. Hearing Sharmila's explanation, Qin Xuan sucked in a breath of cold air. This was the first time he had learned that the power of oath was also a kind of law power, and it was in the hands of the heavens. Before Qin Xuan could continue to ask, Sharmila said to Qin Xuan, the power of laws controlled by the one true God Atheist is the power of wishes. You can think of it as the power of incense. When you make a wish with all your heart, the only true God, Ares, may hear your inner voice and send down his mighty power to help you fulfill your wish. Qin Xuan was stunned and asked, what about the supreme existences of the ancient human race and the ancient demon race? What kind of power did they control? Sharmila replied without hesitation, the ancient human race controlled time, and the ancient demon race controlled space. Chapter 11:19. Sharmila paused for a moment, then continued to explain to Qin Xuan. If the power in a law domain is divided into 10 parts, then the ultimate existence will monopolize 99% of the power in the law domain, while the rest will share the last tiny bit. Therefore, if the ultimate existence is immortal, then the law domain is actually the personal domain of the ultimate existence. It's almost impossible for others to comprehend it in depth. The reason why the laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth are not difficult to comprehend is because there are no ultimate existences in these law domains. Theoretically, everyone who comprehends these laws has the hope of becoming an ultimate existence. After hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Xuan realized that every ultimate existence must be someone who stood at the peak of their respective law domain. Before the ultimate existence fell, the rest of the people in the law domain could only stand at the foot of the mountain and look up to the ultimate existence. Although it's very difficult to comprehend the law of space in the universe, even soul formation cultivators can comprehend some superficial knowledge of the law of space. Cultivators with higher realms can even grasp powerful forces like space collapse and space teleportation. The reason why the law of space can be comprehended at will is because the ultimate existence who once stood at the peak of the law of space has fallen. Qin Chuan once again thought of the ultimate existence he saw in the dream that was forced to self-destruct in the land of runes. Because of the fall of this ultimate existence, the difficulty of comprehending the law of space was infinitely reduced, so much so that even soul formation cultivators could easily comprehend some superficial knowledge. On the other hand, even body integration stage overlords could only comprehend some superficial knowledge of the law of time. Almost no one had any deep understanding of the law of time. In the past, Qin Chuan thought that this was because the law of time was more profound and difficult to comprehend than other laws, so no one could comprehend it. But now, it seemed that the reason for this was entirely because the ultimate existence who once stood at the peak of the law of time was still alive. Before, Qin Chuan had only guessed that the supreme existence of the human race who had been captured by the void tentacles was still alive. But now, he was certain that the supreme existence of the human race was still alive, and it was no secret. Qin Chuan looked at Sharmila and asked, "Sharmila, do you know where that supreme existence of the ancient human race is?" Hearing Qin Chuan's question, Sharmila was slightly taken aback. She said with some surprise, "You're talking about the human sovereign? He's already fallen. How is this possible?" Qin Chuan subconsciously retorted, "According to what you said just now, only when the ultimate existence falls will the law domain be open to others again, allowing others to comprehend it. But now almost no one can comprehend the law of time in depth. Doesn't this mean that the human sovereign is still alive?" Sharmila smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "So that's why you think the human sovereign is still alive? Actually, you're wrong." Qin Chuan frowned and said, "Can you explain?" To put it simply, everyone has their own selfish motives. Even the ultimate existences are no exception. For example, the current heaven is a member of the Tian people. The previous heaven was also a member of the Tian people, and the next heaven will also be a member of the Tian people. Do you understand? Sharmila looked at Qin Chuan and said, "Let's talk about the Protoss. The Lord of the Protoss is the spokesperson of the one true God, Atheist, in the universe. If the Lord of the Protoss falls one day, then the next spokesperson will also be a member of the Protoss. I've said so much, so you should understand what I mean." Qin Chuan was silent for a moment. After a while, he said, "What you mean is that the human sovereign has already fallen, but due to some special reason, the ultimate existences of the law of time can only be born in the human race. Therefore, people of other races are unable to comprehend the law of time in depth, right?" Sharmila nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "You're right. This special reason is actually a protection or restriction set up by the ultimate existences for their own race. We call inheritance. The law of time is the law of inheritance of the ancient human race. Only the ancient human race can reach the peak of the law of time." At this point, Sharmila looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze and said, "You are of the humanoid race and have a thin trace of the human race's blood flowing in your body. In theory, you can also comprehend the law of time and become an ultimate existence. It's just that it's very difficult." Qin Chuan looked deeply at Sharmila and said, "What if it's extremely difficult for even the human race to comprehend the law of time?" Sharmila replied without hesitation, "Then what you said just now might be true. The human sovereign is still alive. Only in this way can there be a situation where even the human race is unable to comprehend the law of time in depth." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but fall silent. Lu Zi, who was standing to the side and listening to the conversation between Qin Chuan and Sharmila, also showed a look of doubt. She and Qin Chuan were both of the human race. Even if the two of them now had the bloodline of the true dragon, it didn't mean that they weren't of the human race. They could still comprehend the law of time. However, until now, neither she nor Qin Xuan had made any achievements in the law of time. Qin Xuan, I once tried to comprehend the law of time, but I failed. Lu Zi sent a sound transmission to Qin Xuan. At that time, I didn't even have the slightest understanding of the law of time. I almost didn't have any ideas. On the other hand, I have mastered the space folding technique and the space collapse technique. When I first tried to comprehend the law of space, I didn't feel shaky at all. I firmly believe that it's because of the Mirage Dragon bloodline in my body. Hearing Lu Zi's sound transmission, Qin Xuan nodded gently and sent a sound transmission to Lu Zi. I understand what you mean. I also guess that the human sovereign is very likely still alive. Lu Zi frowned when she heard this and asked puzzledly, since the supreme existence of our human race is still alive, where is he now? If he is willing to help us, there is no need for us to continue to hide in the land of exile. Lu Zi didn't know where the human sovereign was, but Qin Xuan clearly knew that the human sovereign was now in the Void Empire. The reason why the human race and the monster race were forced to live in the land of exile was because the human sovereign was eroded by the power of the void. He was no longer the human sovereign of the human race. Moreover, he had become the chief culprit behind the collapse of the human race and the monster race. Qin Xuan was clear about this in his heart, but he couldn't explain it to Lu Zi. In response to Lu Zi's question, he could only sigh and whisper, perhaps the human sovereign had some difficulties. If possible, I hope that he will always be the human sovereign. Chapter 1120. Qin Xuan turned his attention to the Protoss. On a huge plain, there was a tall, pure white altar. On the altar, tens of thousands of people from the Shun clan stood there, wearing white robes. Their faces were calm and tranquil. Their robes fluttered in the wind, making them look like immortals. Qin Xuan was stunned when he saw this. He asked in astonishment, "Are the Protoss appearances always so exaggerated?" This was Qin Xuan's first time coming into contact with the Protoss. It was also his first time seeing tens of thousands of people standing on the altar. It was inevitable that he would be shocked. Sharmila nodded and said to Qin Xuan, "The Protoss have always been like this. No matter where they go, they will always maintain their poise. It is said that this is a necessary etiquette for God's people. As for the altar beneath their feet, it is actually the Protoss spaceship. However, it is built to look like an altar. It is convenient for them to manifest their divinity at any time." Qin Xuan was stunned when he heard Sharmila's explanation. An altar-like spaceship? Convenient for them to manifest their divinity? The Protoss way of thinking is really different from the rest. Without waiting for Qin Xuan to ask again, Sharmila continued, "The ones you see now are the Protoss servants. Even the weakest of them is at the peak of the Dongxi realm. When we get closer, they will use their ultimate move." Ultimate move? Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin Xuan couldn't help but be curious. He wanted to know how the divine race was going to make such a big move. And when he thought of this, the distant altar suddenly lit up with a hazy, golden radiance. Soon, this golden radiance spread from the top of the altar, illuminating the entire altar in a golden color. It was as bright as the sun, but this radiance didn't make people feel dazzled. On the contrary, it made people feel comfortable. As the light lit up, a dignified voice sounded from the altar and spread out in all directions. "Divine light illuminates the earth, delivering all living beings from torment. Those who respect and believe in God are God's people and receive God's protection. The only true God, atheist, is the only truth, eternal and immortal." Qin Xuan was shocked when he heard the voices coming from the altar. The scene of nearly 10,000 Dongxu stage cultivators uttering the same words at the same time was very spectacular, especially under the illumination of the golden light. Those with weak willpower could be confused and become followers of the only true God, atheists. When he thought of this, Qin Xuan first looked at Lu Zi. After discovering that Lu Zi was not bewitched, he heaved a sigh of relief. He then looked at the others and was surprised to find that more than half of the people present were wearing a pair of sunglasses. These people are wearing sunglasses to prevent the light from shining on their eyes. As long as the light doesn't shine on their eyes, they won't be bewitched by the Protoss. Sharmila smiled and said to Qin, "The reason why I didn't remind you is because I believe that your willpower is strong enough to not be bewitched." Qin asked curiously, "Has there ever been a situation of being bewitched in the past?" Sharmila nodded and said to Qin, "In the past, we didn't guard against the Protoss. Many of our people were bewitched by the Protoss and became their faithful followers. Later on, we made these preparations. Although there are still some people with weak willpower who are bewitched, this situation has become very rare." Just as Qin and Sharmila were chatting, the crowd behind them suddenly became restless. 3 figures slowly walked out of the crowd, faced the altar, and knelt down. They said in unison, "The only true God, Atheist, may live forever." Seeing these 3 people, Sharmila sighed and said, "From now on, these 3 people will be removed from the list. They are no longer members of the celestial race. However, the God race will accept them and let them become God servants." Qin heard this and asked with some doubt, "In that case, why don't they wear sunglasses?" Before they came, they voluntarily received the sunglasses. They felt that their willpower was strong enough and that they didn't need sunglasses. Sharmila sighed and said, "It turns out that they overestimated themselves." While Sharmila was talking, God's servants of the Protoss came to receive the 3 people. Although the Tian people didn't do anything to stop them, it was inevitable that their expressions weren't very good. After all, these 3 people were Tian people before, and now they had become followers of the Protoss in the blink of an eye. Moreover, this was done in front of so many people. It was really embarrassing. Sharmila watched as the 3 people were led away by the Protoss servants. She then said to Qin, "After the conference starts, we will enter the lava world and fight against the young geniuses of the Protoss. When the time comes, don't show any mercy. Kill as many as you can." Qin was puzzled. Show no mercy at all? In Qin's original plan, he only wanted to find the strongest person on the Protoss side and have a one-on-one fight, or engage in a chaotic battle with the Protoss's children of God. He wanted to force himself into a desperate situation as much as possible and use this opportunity to tap into his own potential. However, Sharmila seemed to have other ideas. Seeing Qin's puzzlement, Sharmila explained to Qin, "According to the rules of the conference, each side will send 99 people into the lava world to fight. The fight will last for 10 days. After 10 days, whichever side has the most people alive from the lava world will win." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qin was a little surprised. "I've heard about it before. The rules don't seem to be like this." Qin was not completely ignorant about the conference. As far as he knew, in the previous conferences, the winner and loser was determined by the weight of a mineral called flame or mind in the lava world. The battle was only secondary. The rules weren't like this in the past, but this time, the Protoss requested to change the rules. "I was just informed," Sharmila said to Qin. "The Protoss has cultivated a talented child of God. They hope to use this conference to make a name for this child of God." Qin frowned and asked, "Is it the province you mentioned before?" Sharmila nodded and said to Qin in a serious tone, "The Protoss values province more than we thought. We suspect that the Protoss wants to use this conference to tap into province's potential and help province reach the body fusion stage." Qin did not expect province's thoughts to coincide with his. They both wanted to use this opportunity to tap into their own potential. However, the Protoss put this matter on the table. They wanted to use the blood of the Tian people's younger generation to water province. Chapter 1121. While Qin and Sharmila were discussing the matter of changing the rules, the 7th elder of the Tian people appeared in the air above the altar. "Come out and speak with me," Myo said. As soon as the seventh elder finished speaking, a figure slowly flew out from the altar. He wore a white robe and a white crown on his head. Barefoot, he stepped on the clouds and arrived in front of the seventh elder. He asked faintly, "Fellow Taoist, you should call me Priest Miosei." The seventh elder looked at Miosei and frowned. Why didn't the Protoss say that he wanted to change the rules of the conference? Miosei calmly replied, "This is God's will. We will announce it to the public as soon as God gives us his will." The seventh elder sneered at Miosei's words. So it's Atheist's idea to change the rules of the conference? Before the seventh elder could finish his words, Myrtle's gaze on the seventh elder suddenly turned sharp. She said in a deep voice, "You'd better add the title One True God before you call God by his name. Otherwise, I'll take it as you challenging the dignity of God." The seventh elder sneered at Miosei's anger. "If you can't give me a reasonable explanation today, then I'll have to challenge your true God." The seventh elder was already furious that the Protoss had bewitched 3 Tian people to believe in Atheist, the one true God. Now that the Protoss had unilaterally changed the rules of the conference, it was as if he didn't put the Tian people in his eyes at all. If Miosei couldn't give him a satisfactory answer today, then he'd like to see just how strong this priestess Miosei was. Miosei was furious at the seventh elder's unyielding attitude. She was about to explode when a figure suddenly appeared beside Miosei. The figure raised a hand and pressed down on Miosei's shoulder, suppressing her anger. When the seventh elder saw the figure that had suddenly appeared, a trace of fear flashed across his eyes. Even with his perception, he had not been able to detect the appearance of this person at the first moment. Friends of the Tian people, the sudden change of the rules this time is indeed our fault, but this is God's will. As God's people, we can only obey. Lucas looked at the seventh elder calmly, stating an objective fact. God's will must be obeyed and must not be disobeyed. The seventh elder frowned as he looked at Lucas. He didn't reply immediately. He could treat Muse casually, but he couldn't treat Lucas casually. After all, Lucas was the high priest of the Church of Protoss. He was at least at the late-stage body integration stage. "Since you've come forward, there's still room for negotiation. We need you to compensate us." The seventh elder looked at Lucas and said, "We won't let you change the rules so easily." Although the seventh elder was afraid of Lucas, it didn't mean that he would lower his head to Lucas. He would not let go of the benefits that he had to fight for the Tian people. Lucas understood the seventh elder's words. After a moment of silence, he replied, "After the exchange is over, you Tian people can mine flame ores in the lava world for a year." The seventh elder frowned slightly when he heard the compensation. Although the compensation was somewhat ordinary, it wasn't too bad. He could reluctantly agree to it, but of course he wouldn't give in so easily. A year isn't enough. At least 3 years. The seventh elder was testing Lucas' bottom line. If Lucas could agree to this condition, then it meant that the God's will that Lucas spoke of was very important. It was so important that Lucas would pay any price to fulfill it. Lucas took a deep look at the seventh elder and said, "All right." The seventh elder didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. After the seventh elder left, Myrtle said in a deep voice, "The Tian people have gone too far." Lucas shook his head and said to Myrtle, "Don't worry about it. Fulfilling God's will is the most important thing. We can ignore our gains and losses for the time being." Not long after the seventh elder and Lucas made the deal, Sharmila received a message from Thelon. Sharmila said to Qinchuan, "The seventh elder has already negotiated with the Protoss. The rules can be changed, but after the exchange, the flame ores in the lava world will be mined by us Tian people for 3 years." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qinchuan frowned slightly. Flame ores were a type of mineral used to refine high-strength explosives. It had a relatively high mining value. The Protoss would rather give up 3 years of mining rights than give up on changing the rules. It seemed that the Protoss was determined to use this opportunity to help Province reach the body integration stage. Seeing Qinchuan frowning and remaining silent, Sharmila continued, "The seventh elder just sent me a message. He hopes that you can kill the Protoss's eldest son, Province, without being able to escape unscathed. If you can do this, then we Tian people are willing to agree to some of your more excessive requests. Qinchuan looked deeply at Sharmila and asked, "What if I want a nebula territory?" Hearing Qinchuan's words, Sharmila was slightly stunned. She asked, "You mean Tron Nebula?" Qinchuan nodded and said to Sharmila, "Yes, Tron Nebula. If you are willing to pay this price, then Province will die." Originally, Qinchuan wanted to wait until he reached the body integration stage before making this request to the Tian people. He was even prepared to pay a heavy price. Now that the Tian people had taken the initiative to come to him and beg, he naturally had to seize this opportunity to extort them. After a moment of silence, Sharmila looked at Qinchuan and said, "The seventh elder said that the Tian people agreed to your conditions. Because the Protoss suddenly changed the rules and the Tian people took this opportunity to extort them, the atmosphere of the exchange meeting suddenly became a little heavy." At this time, the Protoss and the Tian people had gathered at the entrance of the lava world. Qinchuan finally saw Province, who was surrounded by stars. Province was a very handsome man. It was no exaggeration to say that Qinchuan had never seen a man more handsome and charming than Province. Such a man, coupled with his indifferent expression, accentuated his uniqueness and made people unable to take their eyes off him. This is not his natural charm, but a kind of illusion. Just when Qinchuan was surprised by Province's charm, Luzi suddenly whispered to Qinchuan, "Maybe Province is really handsome, but his charm is so great because of the effect of illusion." Chapter 1122. Qinchuan was a little surprised. He did not expect Province's boundless charm to be emitted through illusions. How could a great divine prince use such a method to confuse others? It was a little too despicable. Just as Qinchuan was thinking about this, Lu Zi said to Qinchuan, "Everyone on the other side seems to be fawning over Province, but in fact, they are all confused by Province's illusions. Although the illusions are powerful, they can't fool me. However, it seems that those overlords in the form synthesis stage can't see through Province's illusions. Something is wrong." Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qinchuan's heart skipped a beat. He replied, "Although you reminded me that Province's charm was deliberately created by illusions, I didn't really see through it." Lu Zi was a little surprised. She did not expect Qinchuan to be unable to see through Province's illusions, even after her reminder. This was really strange. Could it be that I can see through Province's illusions because I have the purple star, godly eyes? At this time, Lu Zi did not know what was going on, but she was sure that she did not see wrongly. Province's illusions were indeed there. Qinchuan saw that Lu Zi was also very puzzled. He turned to Sharmila and asked, "What's the origin of this province?" Sharmila was very familiar with it. She briefly introduced it to Qinchuan. Province was originally an inconspicuous branch of the Protoss. Once, the Pope saw him in a crowd and publicly declared the ordinary Province as the great divine prince. Since then, Province has been unstoppable. From being doubted by everyone to being the great divine prince, it only took him a short 10 years. Hearing Sharmila's introduction, Qinchuan could not help but feel a little puzzled. He originally thought that Province was the descendant of a powerhouse in the Protoss, but now it seemed that was not the case. In other words, there was no possibility of a man-made god. If it was not a man-made god, it meant that Province's illusions were so brilliant that even powerhouses in the form synthesis stage were confused by him. Thinking of this, Qinchuan instantly became vigilant. If his guess was true, then this Province was a little strange. "Little Z, can you see the origin of Province's illusions?" Qinchuan asked Lu Zi, "Is the illusions attached to something on his body?" Hearing Qinchuan's question, Lu Zi was slightly stunned. Then, she could not help but show a touch of astonishment on her face. She said to Qinchuan, "Illusions? The illusions are actually integrated with his body. He is the carrier of the illusions. In other words, the illusions on his body are innate, not inscribed by someone. If Qin Chuan had not asked this question, Lu Zi would not have noticed this point. The illusions on Province's body were completely natural. Qin Chuan was very surprised and asked, "Innate illusions?" Lu Zi nodded heavily and said, "Yes, innate illusions. If I didn't have the purple star divine eyes, I wouldn't have been able to see through it." Hearing Lu Zi's answer, Qin Chuan's gaze toward Province suddenly became somewhat subtle. He suddenly felt as if he had been schemed against by the Tian people. This Province was definitely not as simple as just a talented genius. The entrance to the lava world was above a volcano. After jumping into the crater of the volcano, one could pass through the space gate and enter the lava world. Qin Chuan's group and the Protoss group were standing at the edge of the crater at this time. They were looking at each other. One side was cold and vigilant, while the other side was calm and indifferent. When magma began to gush out from the crater of the volcano, the space gate to the lava world slowly opened. The Tian people scrambled to jump in, while the Protoss group calmly stood to the side, not fighting for anything. After all the Tian people had jumped into the crater of the volcano, Qin Chuan took a deep look at Province, and then jumped into the crater of the volcano with Lu Zi. At this time, the Protoss group followed Province's lead and jumped into the crater of the volcano, entering the lava world. In the outside world, the Tian people's group and the Protoss altar each had a huge crystal screen in front of them. The screen clearly displayed the scene inside the lava world. Through the crystal screen, they could see that everyone who entered the lava world was randomly teleported to different places. Some people fell into the magma, some landed on the dry ground, and some floated in the air. Qin Chuan was teleported into a magma field. He stepped on the magma and looked down at the red magma below his feet. He frowned slightly. Even with the strength of his body, he still found the heat somewhat unbearable. The magma in the lava world was indeed a little strange. No wonder people said that the geographical environment of the lava world had a great restraining effect on both sides. Buzz! Suddenly, a figure in a white robe appeared in front of Qin Chuan. He was the young representative from the Protoss. When Qin Chuan noticed him, he also noticed Qin Chuan's existence. Just as the young representative of the Protoss was about to speak to Qin Chuan and preach the doctrine of their one true God, atheists, Qin Chuan's figure suddenly flickered and appeared behind him like a ghost. His action of drawing his sword was clean and neat. The Milky Way sword intent surged and sealed the young representative of the Protoss life force, killing him in one blow. Qin Chuan casually took the storage ring from the corpse's finger and then threw the corpse into the magma field, allowing the magma to swallow it up. At this time, tens of thousands of people in the outside world witnessed this scene at the same time. The young representative of the Protoss, who died in Qin Chuan's hands, was the first sacrifice in this conference. The seventh elder saw Qin Chuan's performance and nodded lightly. He said to the fifth elder, who was with him, "Although Qin Chuan is only at the late stage of the Dongxu realm, the Protoss are not his match at all. He can easily kill them." The fifth elder looked at the expressionless Qin Chuan on the crystal screen and said to the seventh elder, "Qin Chuan is strong, but are you really confident that he can kill Province?" The seventh elder shook his head and replied, "I'm not 100% confident, but Qin Chuan is the only reliable choice. Apart from him, who else can you think of that has the strength? Don't tell me you want Sharmila to fight Province." The fifth elder frowned slightly and said, "Isn't our plan a bit too hasty? Although that mysterious person has cited a lot of evidence to prove that Province is the incarnation of the one true God, atheists, in the mortal world, it's only a one-sided story." The seventh elder looked deeply at the fifth elder and said, "No matter what Province's identity is, there's no harm in killing him." Chapter 1123. While the Tian people were paying attention to Qin Chuan, the Protoss were also paying attention to Qin Chuan. When she saw how easily Qin Chuan killed a Tian person, Muse frowned and asked, "Who is this person?" According to our information, There is no such person among the younger generation of the Tian people. Lucas shook his head when he heard Muse's question. He replied, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. He is no match for Province. Seeing how confident Lucas was in Province, Muse swallowed her words. She believed in Lucas' judgment and Province's strength. No matter who the enemy was, Province would not lose. At this moment, Tian people and Protoss young representatives were constantly meeting in the lava world. Due to the change in the rules, both sides were no longer focused on the flame wars. Instead, they were focused on attacking and killing each other. However, in terms of overall strength, the Tian people were weaker than the Protoss. In just a short period of time, 9 Tian people had fallen, while only 6 Protoss had fallen, including the one who was killed by Qinchuan. Whether it was the Tian people or the Protoss, all of them were thinking of winning by numbers. As a result, there were no more battles in the lava world for a short period of time. Everyone was gathering at the center of their respective factions. The Protoss's center was naturally Province, while the Tian people's center was Sharmilla. As for Qinchuan, he did not gather at Sharmilla's location like the other Tian people. Instead, he wandered around alone, looking for traces of the Protoss. Province was sitting cross-legged on top of a volcano. He calmly looked at Lu Zi and said, Miss, come with me. Lu Zi frowned when she heard Province's words. Why should I go with you? You are the one I have chosen. You are the future goddess. Province looked at Lu Zi and slowly reached out his hand. He said to Lu Zi, come with me. If it were anyone else, they would have been bewitched by Province's endless charm. However, Lu Zi was different. She had the purple star god's eyes. She could see through Province's illusion and see the real Province. Therefore, she had no interest in Province's invitation. Sorry, I don't want to be some goddess. Lu Zi looked at Province. I am here to kill you. Before she finished speaking, LVZ raised her hand and waved her spirit energy at Province. It turned into a veil in the air and a shrouded Province. Facing LVZ's attack, Province whispered, You can't refuse me. Buzz. Province's body suddenly emitted a soft light. This light penetrated the light and poured onto Lu Zi's body. Province thought that Lu Zi would give up her attack and throw herself into his arms. However, to his surprise, Lu Zi had no intention of giving up her attack at all. When a light veil wrapped around his body and suddenly tightened, Province couldn't help but frown. If anyone else saw this scene, they would be very distressed. However, in Lu Zi's eyes, this scene was not worth caring about at all. As Lu Zi's spiritual energy continued to increase, the pressure on Province increased. It was as if the light veil was going to crush him. In the face of danger, Province finally stopped pinning his hopes on his charm. The light around his body shook and tore the light veil apart. You are very special. Province slowly stood up and looked at Lu Zi with a hint of excitement in his eyes. You are the first woman to attack me so fiercely. You are very special. Hearing Province's words, LVZ couldn't help but frown. She felt that Province was too narcissistic, too disgusting, and too infuriating. Just when Lu Zi felt that the current Province was disgusting enough, Province refreshed Lu Zi's understanding of him. Province looked at Lu Zi with a very special gaze and said affectionately, Since I can't conquer you with my infinite charm, then let me conquer you with my unparalleled strength. Disgusting. Lu Zi shouted and waved her hand. Layers of fog fell and shrouded Province. She originally wanted to trap Province with an illusion array and then make other plans. However, Lu Zi didn't expect the illusion array to have no effect on Province. Seeing Province walk out of the illusion array step by step, Lu Zi couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Most of her abilities were based on illusion arrays. Now that the illusion array didn't work on Province, it meant that she had to use other methods to deal with Province. This was too difficult for her. I can't transform into a dragon, nor can I use illusion arrays. The restrictions are too great. Lu Zi took a deep look at Province and decided to retreat for now. She didn't want to confront Province head-on. Seeing that Lu Zi was about to leave, Province shouted and waved his hand to shoot a golden light at Lu Zi. Lu Zi jumped and dodged, but the golden light suddenly exploded and turned into a golden robe that wrapped around Lu Zi's body, immobilizing Lu Zi. You used a light veil to deal with me, and now I'm using a golden veil to deal with you. It'll be a good story in the future. Province slowly walked to Lu Zi's side and smiled at Lu Zi. Give up struggling and come with me, my goddess. Buzz. Just when Province thought that victory was in his hands, Lu Zi's figure suddenly turned into a purple mist and slowly drifted in all directions. In the air, it turned into 4 Lu Zis and flew in 4 different directions. There was no difference between the 4 LVZs in terms of aura and physique. Even Province couldn't tell which one was the real one in a short time. Just as Province was hesitating about which figure to pursue, the 4 LVZs had already fled far away and disappeared. Seeing this, Province could only sigh with regret. It seems that I still need some time to accept you as my goddess. As the eldest son of the Protoss, Province had always been the focus of attention on both sides. When Province and Lu Zi first fought, both the Tian people and the Protoss paid attention to them. The Protoss thought that Province's infinite charm could easily subdue Lu Zi, but Lu Zi's performance was completely beyond the Protoss expectations. Not only was she not charmed by Province, but she also escaped from Province's hands. On the other side, the Tian people were also very surprised, but not because Lu Zi escaped from Province's hands, but because Province actually believed that Lu Zi was his goddess. Chapter 1124. The lava world was very big. Qin Chuan had been moving in one direction for a whole day. Apart from meeting a young Protoss representative, he didn't meet anyone else. His photon computer had no signal here, and he didn't know if there was a special way to communicate with other people, so he could only move forward. On the other side, unbeknownst to Qin Chuan, more than 50 people had gathered around Sharmila. They had discovered each other through the unique bloodline connection between Tian people and gradually strengthened their team. In the process of strengthening the team, 10 young Protoss representatives had already died in their hands. However, they didn't think that this was a good result because they knew that the Protoss must also be hunting down the young Tian people. Now, it all depended on which side would be able to kill more opponents before the main forces of the two sides met. Sharmila had been looking forward to meeting Qin Chuan or Lu Zi on the way, but unfortunately, she didn't see Lu Zi or Qin Chuan. She didn't even hear any news about them. Sharmila had a certain amount of confidence in Qin Chuan's strength, but she was more worried about Lu Zi. Lu Zi's attainments in illusion formations are very high, but when facing the Protoss, illusion formations can only trap enemies, but it's too difficult to kill them. If there are too many people, she will be in danger. As a friend, Sharmila absolutely didn't want Lu Zi to be in any danger, so she had to find Lu Zi as soon as possible. As for Qin Chuan, she felt that Qin Chuan might not be willing to move with them. While Sharmila and the others were looking for LVZ, LVZ was avoiding the pursuit of the divine race. LVZ frowned as she looked at the dozens of divine race, 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 divine. Race divine 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 race goddess, don't run. Come back with us to see the grand divine. LVZ's face turned ashen when she heard the shouts coming from behind her. At first, she didn't know what the goddess meant, but after interacting with these divine bodies earlier, she realized that the goddess was the concubine of the eldest son of God, province. According to the rules of the Church of the Protoss, the Grand Divine could have 99 goddesses as concubines at the same time. And she was the 73rd goddess that Province had chosen, which meant that Province wanted her to be his 73rd concubine. If it weren't for the fact that these Protoss bodies were immune to illusion formations, she would have turned around and killed all of these disgusting people. Buzz! A beam of divine light shot over. LVZ subconsciously raised the heavenly Luo umbrella to block this beam of divine light. At the same time, she brandished the blood-drinking spear in her hand, wanting to stop the pursuit of the people behind her. However, the other party easily dodged the attack of the blood-drinking spear and gathered in one place. They were still tightly following behind her without any intention of giving up. Seeing that these Protoss bodies were getting closer and closer to her, Lu Zi finally became angry. She suddenly turned around and spat out a dark purple flame at the many Protoss behind her. This was Lu Zi's dragon breath. However, without transforming into her dragon form, Lu Zi couldn't continuously spit out dragon breath. When the dragon breath rushed toward the Protoss bodies didn't take it seriously at first. However, when the dragon breath approached them, their expressions finally became flustered. However, it was already too late for them to dodge. When the dragon breath exploded, each of them was stained with the dragon breath. Soon, they were all set on fire and let out miserable screams. Seeing this, Lu Zi didn't want to give these Protoss bodies a chance to get rid of the dragon breath. She continuously swung the bloodthirsty spear in her hand and quickly killed several Protoss bodies. The rest of the Protoss bodies had already gotten rid of the dragon breath. They were all battered and exhausted. Facing Lu Zi, who was slaughtering everyone, they could only turn around and flee. Lu Zi didn't chase after them. She let the Protoss bodies escape. After identifying the direction, she flew toward the west. At this time, Lu Zi didn't know that she had once again become the focus of everyone's attention. The seventh elder frowned as he looked at Lu Zi on the crystal screen. He asked the fifth elder, "The flames that Lu Zi released just now were very strange. They seemed to be very destructive. The Protoss bodies were in so much pain that they wished they were dead. However, there weren't any obvious wounds on their bodies. It seems to be directly affecting the soul." The fifth elder nodded lightly and said in a low voice, "The flames LVZ released are probably not ordinary flames. She's a formidable talisman formation master that's skilled in illusory formations, and she targets the soul. So it isn't strange for her to release flames that target the soul now. But did you notice the change in her eyes before she released these flames?" The seventh elder thought back. At that time, he didn't pay special attention to the changes in Lu Zi's eyes. Therefore, he didn't notice anything. He shook his head and asked, "What did you discover?" The fifth elder looked at Lu Zi on the crystal screen and said to the seventh elder, "Qin Chuan has a subordinate called Night Serenity. He has the bloodline of a first-generation dragon subspecies. It's very rare." The seventh elder was slightly surprised when he heard the fifth elder's words. He said with some surprise, "You're saying that Lu Zi's eyes turned into the golden vertical pupils that are unique to the dragon race? She just released a dragon's breath?" The fifth elder shook his head and replied, "No, her eyes are still light purple. However, they did turn into vertical pupils the moment she released the flames. Therefore, I suspect that Lu Zi also has a dragon's bloodline. However, I don't know if it's a dragon's bloodline or a true dragon's bloodline." A true dragon's bloodline. When the seventh elder heard the fifth elder's words, he could not help but reveal a look of shock on his face. The ancient demon clan had disappeared for countless years, and the dragon clan had long disappeared without a trace. It was already a great fortune for Yi Yu to obtain the blood of the first-generation Sky Dragon clan. If such a rare and precious blood as the true dragon bloodline were to appear in the world, it would cause a huge commotion. The fifth elder saw the shocked expression on the seventh elder's face and said, "Don't be too shocked. I'm just guessing. After all, A true dragon's bloodline is very rare. Not even a drop of it can appear in millions of years. Lucy may not be able to obtain a true dragon's bloodline. Perhaps she only has the bloodline of a first-generation dragon subspecies. The seventh elder calmed himself down and nodded gently. Although the bloodline of a first-generation dragon subspecies was relatively rare, it wasn't to the point that people would covet it. Moreover, since Qin Chuan was a human, then Lu Zi should also be a human. Chapter 1125. On the other hand, the Protoss were also paying attention to Lu Zi. However, it wasn't because of how strong Lu Zi was, but because Lu Zi was the 73rd goddess chosen by Province. As the elders of Province, they would do their best to fulfill the demands of Province. Lucas said faintly, "This woman does have some ability. After the exchange is over, find a way to trade this woman from the divine race, and let her become the 73rd goddess of Province." "But the Tian people might not let us get what we want," Priestess Muther said, after some thought. "As long as the benefits are big enough to move them, they will let us get what we want," Priestess Muther said calmly. High Priest Lucas calmly replied, "They are a group of people with no faith and are only interested in profit. Making a deal with them is a very simple matter." "I understand." Priestess Muther nodded. "I will take care of this matter." While Priestess Muther and Priestess Muther were talking, a new change occurred in the lava world. Before the Protoss could return to Province's side, they ran into Qin Chuan, who happened to be passing by. Qin Chuan saw that the Protoss were not in good condition and wanted to take their lives, but when he noticed that their injuries were caused by soul fire, he immediately stopped the Protoss and asked, "Who caused your injuries? Where did you meet her?" When they heard Qin Chuan's question, the Protoss, who were not in good condition, frowned. They had noticed Qin Chuan before, and they remembered that Qin Chuan was standing with Lu Zi. When they heard Qin Chuan's question, they guessed that Qin Chuan and Lu Zi had a close relationship. Since Lu Zi was the 73rd goddess chosen by Province, they could not let Qin Chuan and Lu Zi meet. "Are you talking about the woman with purple hair and eyes?" The Protoss looked at Qin Chuan. "She has fallen into the hands of Province." When he heard the Protoss's words, Qin Chuan could not help but raise his eyebrows slightly. He could see that the Protoss was lying, and he could also guess where Lu Zi was from the direction they were coming from. The reason he asked was mainly to confirm. Now he was sure that Lu Zi was fine. Not only did these guys suffer in the hands of Lu Zi, but they also wanted to lure him to Province's side. However, Qin Chuan happened to be looking for Province. Now that someone was leading the way, he naturally had no objections. "Then take me to see your great son of God, Province." Qin Chuan looked at the Protoss in front of him with a playful gaze. He was full of anticipation for the upcoming battle with Province. In the outside world, when everyone saw how easily Qin Chuan believed the Protoss's words and was ready to meet Province with the Protoss's son, they all frowned. Although Thelon was very confident in Qin Chuan's strength, now that Province had gathered more than 60 young Protoss representatives, more than half of them were Protoss's sons. In the face of such a powerful force, Qin Chuan's strength would be difficult to deal with, no matter how strong he was. The seventh patriarch also did not think that Qin Chuan had any chance of winning. He was even prepared for Qin Chuan to run away when he saw the Protoss's strength. However, the fifth patriarch had a different opinion. "Thelon once told me that Qin Chuan is very eager to improve his strength in the shortest time possible. He agreed to participate in this exchange this time to create pressure for himself and tap into his potential." It can be said that he has the same idea as the Protoss. However, Province has the Protoss to pave the way for him, while Qin Chuan has to rely on himself to find an opportunity. Now that the opportunity has come, he will definitely give a try. If he can't win, I believe he will have a way to escape. Hearing the fifth patriarch's words, the seventh patriarch frowned slightly and said, "You are too optimistic. If Province is really the incarnation of the only true God, Atheist, do you think Qin Chuan can win?" The fifth patriarch looked at the seventh patriarch meaningfully and said, You underestimate Qin Xuan too much. On the Protoss's side, when the Protoss's sons deceived Qin Xuan and wanted to take Qin Xuan to Meat Province, Myrtle sneered and said, "This person killed several of our young representatives. Does he really think he is invincible? How dare he be so arrogant to Meat Province? He is simply courting death." Lucas originally thought the same, but when he noticed the faint look of anticipation on Qin Xuan's face, he couldn't help but have a bad premonition. This person is very confident. He knows that the Protoss are deliberately deceiving him, but he deliberately chose to be deceived. Hearing Lucas's words, Myrtle was slightly stunned and then said, "So what if he is confident? If he can defeat Province just because he is confident, then Province wouldn't have become Province's province." Lucas pursed his lips and said to Myrtle, "Send someone to gather information about this person." Seeing that Lucas valued Qin Xuan so much, Myrtle's expression became solemn and said, "I understand." Qin Xuan followed behind the Protoss's sons and flew unhurriedly towards Province's location. After flying for about half a day, they finally met. Just as Qin Xuan had expected, Province didn't act alone at all. There were nearly 70 young Protoss representatives around Province, and without exception, all of them were at the peak of the Dongxi realm. When they saw their companions, the Protoss who led Qin Xuan couldn't help but look back at Qin Xuan. They wanted to see a look of fear and panic on Qin Xuan's face. However, they didn't expect that Qin Xuan was actually laughing, and laughing very happily. "It's been hard on you guys. If it wasn't for you guys leading the way, it wouldn't have been easy for me to find these guys." Hearing Qin Xuan's words, the Protoss couldn't help but be stunned. They asked with some astonishment, "Aren't you afraid at all?" Qin Xuan looked at the Protoss with some confusion and asked, "Why should I be afraid? Is it because there are so many of you?" As he spoke, an excited smile appeared on Qin Xuan's face. He said to the godsons, "Seeing as you've already been injured and are leading the way for me, it's best if you obediently stand to the side. If you get caught in the shock waves of the battle later, don't say that I didn't take care of you." Chapter 11:26. The Divine Sons leading the way were surprised to see Qin Xuan so confident. They had never seen anyone so confident when facing Province. Moreover, Province had more than 60 helpers. "You don't know Province at all. You will die a horrible death." The Divine Sons leading the way firmly believed that Qin Xuan would die a horrible death. Everyone who looked down on Province would die a horrible death. No one was an exception. Qin Xuan chuckled and said, "Someone will die a horrible death, but it won't be me." As he spoke, Qin Xuan raised his hand and pushed away the Divine Sons in front of him. Then he walked toward Province and the Protoss representatives not far away. The Protoss representatives were extremely calm in the face of Qin Xuan's arrival. This was because no one believed that Qin Xuan could cause a storm when facing them. And the source of all this confidence came from Province, who was in the middle of the crowd. In the group, a Divine Son slowly stepped forward and blocked Qin Xuan's path. He asked, "Do you want to convert to the Soul Church?" Hearing the Divine Son's question, Qin Xuan shook his head and said, "Please step aside. I'm here to kill." The Divine Son did not back down. He shook his head and said, "You can't kill any of us. God won't allow you to kill God's people." Before the Divine Son's voice fell, a silver-white sword flashed and easily cut off the Divine Son's neck. Until death, the Divine Son's expression was serene. This was because he did not expect Qin Xuan to take the initiative to attack. He also did not expect that Qin Xuan's attack would be so fierce and powerful. He was killed before he could react. Qin Xuan looked at the Divine Son's corpse that fell to the ground and said indifferently, "I've already said that I'm here to kill. Why don't you believe me?" Just as Qin Xuan was speaking, the Protoss looked at Qin Xuan with cold and sharp eyes. Everyone spoke in unison and let out thunderous roars at Qin Xuan. "You killed Xiangnu. This is provoking God. You will be punished by God." Qin Xuan raised his eyes and looked at Province, who was in the middle of the crowd. He hooked his finger and said, Come, let me see how you're going to punish me. Before Chinchuan's voice fell, an extremely dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the crowd and shot toward Chinchuan. Chinchuan faced this attack. Chinchuan had no intention of dodging. He wanted to take this attack and see how strong the Protoss's means. Space collapse. Chinchuan shouted. The space in front of him suddenly collapsed, revealing an irregular black hole. The golden light shot straight into the black hole, but it did not affect Chinchuan at all. It was as if a punch had landed on cotton. The Protoss felt very uncomfortable. Is this all you've got? Chinchuan smiled playfully. Don't always play with the gods and ghosts. You only want to shine. Do something serious. Faced with Chinchuan's ruthless mockery, the Protoss were furious. Dozens of figures among them roared in unison. Their bodies suddenly rose and attacked Chinchuan. Their physical strength was so strong that it faintly caused small cracks to appear in space. Seeing these Protoss rushing toward him, Chinchuan's eyes suddenly lit up. He said in a low voice, "What a strong body!" While Chinchuan was sighing, these people had already arrived in front of Chinchuan. They raised their hands and punched. Powerful spiritual energy seeped out of their bodies and turned into a hurricane-like force that swept toward Chinchuan. The effect of dozens of people punching at the same time made Chinchuan feel as if he was in a gale or as if he was in a sealed space. His whole body was restrained, as if he was frozen. These people's cooperation is really amazing. Chinchuan was a little surprised. He did not rush to counterattack. Instead, he carefully comprehended the subtleties of this cooperation. However, at this moment, a person suddenly appeared in front of Chinchuan. He raised his hand and grabbed Chinchuan's head, wanting to crush Chinchuan's head. Slap! Chinchuan subconsciously waved his hand and slapped the other party's face. The other party was immediately sent flying. Teeth and blood spurted out of his mouth. Don't disturb me. Chinchuan frowned slightly. He had just figured out something from this exquisite cooperation with great difficulty. But before he could deepen his impression, he was interrupted. When the rest of the people saw Chinchuan's performance, the expressions on their faces became somewhat strange. This fellow was under their siege, yet he was not thinking of how to escape. Instead, he was carefully contemplating what they were doing. He seemed to be completely unaffected and did not put their attacks in his eyes at all. Just when this strange thought appeared in everyone's mind, Chinchuan's lips suddenly curled into a smile. He muttered in a low voice, "So that's how it is." As he spoke, Chinchuan raised his head and looked at the Protoss around him. He let out a low roar. An extremely powerful force erupted from his body and suddenly rushed in all directions. Not only did it instantly break through the Protoss's joint attack, but it also caused the Protoss's formation to become chaotic, revealing a huge flaw. Whoosh! Chinchuan's figure flickered like a ghost. He stabbed dozens of times in a breath's time. Under the surging Milky Way sword intent, none of the Protoss were spared. All of them died under the sword. Seeing this scene, the Protoss's mind shook violently. Province's gaze towards Chinchuan also became serious. He was no longer as calm as before. Chinchuan saw the change in the Protoss's expression and grinned. "You're finally willing to take me seriously? Then don't use such low-level methods to test my limits. Just come at me together. I'm in a hurry." Province finally could not bear the incomparably arrogant Chinchuan. He opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, "Kill." Following Province's order, the remaining 50 or so people moved together. They surrounded Chinchuan from all directions. With the nearly 30 divine sons as the core, they formed a large formation and surrounded Chinchuan. In the face of this situation, Chinchuan was not worried at all. Instead, he became excited. Chinchuan looked at Province and grinned. "Since you're still not willing to make a move, I'll force you to make a move after I kill these people." Before his voice fell, a red rune formation suddenly appeared in Chinchuan's palm, emitting an extremely shocking, scorching aura. Burning heaven. Following Chinchuan's low roar, balls of crimson flames suddenly appeared between heaven and earth, sweeping in all directions. In just an instant, the entire world was completely filled with crimson flames, the boiling hot aura causing one's heart to tremble in fear. Chapter 11:27. Burning the Heavens and Boiling the Seas. Qinchuan's fire not only scattered the Protoss's formation, but also melted the flesh and souls of dozens of young Protoss representatives in an instant. Even some of the more powerful Protossas had unfortunately fallen. When the fire came to an end, less than 30 of the 50 Protoss were still breathing, and not a single one of them could still fight. Looking at the Protoss who were badly burned by the raging fire, Qinchuan grinned and asked the ashen-faced province, "Are you willing to make a move now? Outside?" When everyone saw what Qinchuan said to the Protossas who were leading the way, almost everyone sneered, laughing at Qinchuan for overestimating himself and looking down on the Protoss. When everyone saw how Qinchuan cleanly killed the Protossas who were blocking the way, they were still sneering. They all felt that Qinchuan was too arrogant and was cutting off his own path of retreat. When everyone saw how Qinchuan was surrounded by dozens of young Protoss representatives and was trapped by their fists, they didn't even have time to sneer before Qinchuan slapped away the person who tried to disturb him and then pulled out his sword and killed dozens of people in an instant. Everyone no longer sneered, but turned silent. When they saw how arrogant Qinchuan was provoking province, the corners of everyone's mouth had just revealed a disdainful smile when Qinchuan used Burning the Heavens and turned the battlefield into a sea of fire, burning away everyone's disdain and ridicule. The seventh elder looked at the flames in the sky with a complicated gaze and said to the fifth elder, "This is one of the level 6 battle formations that Qinchuan gave to us Tian people, Burning the Heavens. In an environment like the lava world, the power of Burning the Heavens can be increased by at least 30%. Ordinary people can't block it. If this fire is used, the Protoss will be injured if not killed." The fifth elder nodded and said to the seventh elder, "That's right." The Protoss underestimated Qinchuan. Qinchuan's strength is comparable to a mid-heaven integration stage overlord. If Province doesn't make a move, Qinchuan can kill as many of these ordinary Protosses as come. The seventh elder looked at the fifth elder with a subtle gaze and asked, "Is Province deliberately trying to exhaust Qinchuan's strength, trying to defeat Qinchuan with a sea of people? It's not that Province is arrogant, but a freak like Qinchuan is rare." The fifth elder looked at the seventh elder, and said, "I'm sure Lucas and Lux are furious right now." Just as the fifth elder had guessed, Lucas and Myrtle were furious. They were about to explode from anger. Although they didn't care about the deaths of the Dongshu young representatives, it didn't mean that they were willing to see these young representatives being slaughtered like pigs. They didn't even have the slightest ability to fight back. Lux stared at the raging flames on the crystal screen with hatred and said with gritted teeth, "A bunch of trash." Yes, Lux didn't hate Qinchuan for being strong, but he hated the fact that the Protoss stage representatives were too weak. They were defeated by Qinchuan alone, and now he could only pin his hopes on Province. He hoped that Province would be able to kill Qinchuan and restore the dignity of the Protoss. Compared to Miosei, Lucas was thinking more. He looked in the direction of the Celestials and said to Miosei, "There's something wrong with this person. He's the same as Province. They're both peerless geniuses whose strength far exceeds their current realm. They're both digging out their own potential and trying to break through their limits." Hearing Lucas's words, Muse was shocked. Doesn't that mean Province is in danger? Lux looked at the crystal screen and said to Lux, "We can only trust Province." In the face of Qinchuan's repeated provocations, Province finally couldn't take it anymore. He raised his hand and waved gently, sending warm light to the burnt divine suns. The dead skin and muscles fell off one after another, and new tender flesh and white skin grew out. It was like a withered tree that had come back to life. Qinchuan saw this scene and laughed. He didn't interrupt Province's actions. Since Province wanted to buy people's hearts at this time, then he would let Province have his way. After all, Province was a dying man, so it was better to be lenient. After treating all the survivors, Province looked at Qin Chuan with sorrowful eyes and said in a deep voice, "You're a devil, an unpardonable demon." Hearing Province's words, Qin Chuan smiled and nodded. "Yes, you're right. I'm a devil, an unpardonable evil demon, and you're the kind-hearted, benevolent, and generous son of God. You're the main character. Come, I've already prepared the plot for you. All that's left is for you to kill me and receive the cheers of everyone." Province originally wanted to say something to warm up the atmosphere, but after hearing Qin Chuan's words, he couldn't say anything. He looked at Qin Chuan deeply and roared, "Slay the demon, defend justice." Buzz! With Province's roar, his body suddenly shone brightly. Countless golden rays of light shot out from his body and turned into countless shadows in the air. They all chanted the scriptures of the one God religion towards Qin Chuan. The scriptures turned into golden words and flew towards Qin Chuan. They stuck to his body like shackles, completely sealing Qin Chuan's body and spiritual power. Qin Chuan struggled for a moment and found that these scriptures were extremely difficult to deal with. He couldn't shake them off at all. When he tried to use his spiritual energy to attack the scriptures, he found that his spiritual energy had been sealed and he couldn't use any moves. Even his mental energy had stagnated. At the same time, Qin Chuan heard a majestic voice ringing in his ears, causing the struggling thoughts in his heart to gradually calm down. He suddenly felt a little sleepy and wanted to lie down and rest quietly. "Don't sleep." When the little armored dragon's tender voice sounded in Qin Chuan's brain, the groggy Qin Chuan woke up almost instantly. At the same time, Province's figure appeared in front of Qin Chuan. He held a vajra in his hand and was about to hit Qin Chuan's head hard. At this critical moment, Qin Chuan shouted angrily, "Space-piercing!" Following Qin Chuan's angry shout, the space around Qin Chuan suddenly exploded, turning into sharp fragments that shot out in all directions like broken mirrors. Province bore the brunt of the impact. His body was suddenly cut into countless fine wounds, and blood was dripping from them. At the same time, the scriptures binding Qin Chuan's body turned into light spots and disappeared. Qin Chuan immediately regained control of his body. Chapter 1128. This is impossible. Province's face was full of shock. He could not believe that Qin Chuan was not asleep under the majestic chanting of the scriptures. He still had the strength to fight back. "Nothing is impossible." Qin Chuan sneered. His body flickered and suddenly appeared in front of Province. Lightning flashed in his right palm, and Leifa blasted toward Province. In the face of Qin Chuan's powerful counterattack, Province growled and waved the vajra in his hand toward Qin Chuan. The vajra exploded with a powerful force and blocked the descending Leifa. Rumble! Leifa suddenly exploded and turned into the power of thunder. Qin Chuan saw that Province had broken Leifa. He immediately sneered and released a rainbow light toward Province. This was the rainbow light, a level 6 battle formation. Province was furious when he saw Qin Chuan using the same light as his counterattack. He could not tolerate any attack from a demon like Qin Chuan. "This is the light of the demon." Hearing Province's roar, Qin Chuan sneered and did not even bother to refute. Whether it was the light of the demon or the light of God, as long as it could kill you, it was a good light. The rainbow light didn't stop because of Province's slander. It turned into a rainbow light belt and wrapped around Province's body, binding his hands and feet. In an instant, Province was wrapped up like a dumpling. Whoosh! Qin Chuan's body flashed and appeared in front of Province. The vajra wanted to stop Qin Chuan, but Qin Chuan sent it flying with a Milky Way sword. He casually threw the Milky Way sword to block the vajra, while he focused all his energy on Province. Qin Chuan looked at Province, whose face was filled with grief and indignation, and asked doubtfully, "Is that all you've got?" Qin Chuan originally thought that Province was extremely strong and would at least pose some obstruction to him. However, he did not expect that other than chanting the scripture at the beginning, Province's strength was so weak that it was almost no different from the other sons of God. Chinchuan's frown deepened when he saw that Province was still unable to break free from the rainbow light. He asked, "Do you really have no other means? If that's all you've got, then I'll have to kill you." As he spoke, Chinchuan raised his hand and placed it between Province's eyebrows. Just as he was about to use his sword chi to pierce through Province's head, a hazy light suddenly shone from between Province's eyebrows. Chinchuan felt a sharp pain in his finger and subconsciously pulled it back. At the same time, the hazy light quickly spread out and enveloped Province from head to toe, melting the rainbow light in an instant. Seeing this, Chinchuan could not help but grin and say, "Now that's more interesting." Province, who had regained his freedom, slowly raised his head and looked at Chinchuan. To Chinchuan's surprise, Province's gaze was completely different from before, and his aura had also changed greatly. It was deeper and more vigorous than before. God should be respected. Province looked at Chinchuan and said in a tone that was neither happy nor sad, "Everyone must respect God." Hearing Province's words, Chinchuan could not help but feel a trace of respect for the only true God, Atheist. He regretted what he had done before, and felt pain for his arrogance. He wanted to apologize to those who had died, and even pay with his life. When Chinchuan thought of committing suicide to repent for his past sins to God, he raised his hand and wanted to smash his own head to end his sinful life. But when Chinchuan's palm touched his own head, he suddenly stopped. The spiritual energy gushing out from his palm was less than 2 millimeters away from Chinchuan's head. Chinchuan slowly put down his palm. He glanced at Province with lingering fear and said in a dignified tone, "You really do have some ability. I almost killed myself." If the little armored dragon had not awakened Chinchuan, perhaps Chinchuan would have really killed himself. Recalling his remorse for God and his hatred for killing, he felt a chill in his heart. Province's ability was really too strange. It reminded him of the willpower that Sharmila once told him. Is this the willpower that the only true God, Atheist, has mastered? His words are simply the law. It's too terrifying. Just when Chinchuan was having these thoughts, Province whispered again, "The people of the God of Massacre will fall into the path of evil. Evil demons should repent and commit suicide to atone for their sins." As Province's voice fell, Chinchuan's heart once again had an uncontrollable urge to commit suicide. This time, without waiting for him to do anything, the little armored dragon roared in his mind, successfully allowing Chinchuan's will to gain the upper hand and suppress the urge to commit suicide in his heart. This time, Chinchuan did not intend to continue to give Province a chance to speak. He directly raised his hand and prepared to kill Province with the void-piercing skill, but Province looked at Chinchuan indifferently and whispered, "You disrespect God. You will be punished by heaven." Rumble. Without any warning, the lightning tribulation descended from the sky and struck Chinchuan with a loud bang. The surging power of lightning surged into Chinchuan's body and was quickly refined and absorbed by Chinchuan with the law of lightning. As a result, Chinchuan's attack was temporarily delayed. Seeing that it did not have any effect on Chinchuan this time, Province frowned slightly and spoke again. "Those who intend to slay God will suffer the pain of a mountain of swords and a sea of fire. They will fall into the infernal purgatory and will never be reincarnated." When Chinchuan heard Province's words, he subconsciously looked down at his feet. As expected, a dense number of sharp blades appeared under his feet. Between the gaps of these blades, raging flames were spewing out, and their power was even stronger than Fun Tion's. Just as Chinchuan was thinking of a way to break through the mountain of swords and sea of fire, Province's face suddenly turned pale. Pitch-black blood slowly flowed out of his nostrils and mouth, as if he had suffered a great injury. Obviously, the use of such a powerful force like the law of verbal compliance was not without any side effects. "Sky Piercer!" Chinchuan growled and destroyed the mountain of swords and sea of fire with the power of Skypiercer. He returned to the normal lava world, and this time, he was only 100 meters away from Province. Seeing that the mountain of swords and sea of fire could not stop Qinchuan, Province was finally enraged. He said hatefully, "God says, you will be destroyed." Before Province could finish his words, Qinchuan's figure suddenly appeared in front of Province. He threw a punch at Province's face and broke his teeth, causing Province to whimper in pain. How many times have I told you, I don't believe in God? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.